Chapter 246. The uprising of the refugees happened almost every few decades. The Yi Kingdom was prone to drought. When times were bad and more people starved to death, some people who didn't know the truth of the world would want to pull the emperor off his horse. But LV Xingyang knew that Daotong and Qinzhou wouldn't allow large-scale revolts in the Yi Kingdom. He also knew that Bai Yanjun's promise meant that the Yi Kingdom would be prosperous for a long time. Thus he sent troops to suppress them first. They suppressed them while comforting them. They killed some and helped others. In the end, the revolts would disappear without a trace. But 6 months later, LV Xingyang received news that the revolting refugees didn't disappear. Instead, they became even more powerful. At that time, the officials of the Yi Kingdom knew that the refugees couldn't shake the country. Thus, they covered up the reports and weren't worried. There was no precedent for this in thousands of years. How could they appear in the Yi Kingdom now? As a result, the number of rebels had reached 40,000, and they occupied the territory of 6 prefectures. The leader of the rebels was named Songdinka. His hometown was a county called Qingyang. Thus, after taking over 6 provinces, he publicly proclaimed himself emperor. The name of the country was Qing. The emperor finally grew anxious and asked for help from Daotong and Qinzhou. But the Taoist in the capital of Wei only said that he would report to his sect. Then, he said that the emperor could take care of this himself. It was just 40,000. What was there to be afraid of? Another 3 months passed like this. The matter became more and more serious. The rebel army took over 6 provinces and 18 prefectures. They almost took over a third of the Yi Kingdom. The soldiers at the front lines reported that the rebel army even had demons and people who knew Taoist spells helping them. The soldiers of the Yi Kingdom were no match. The emperor asked for help from Daotong and Qinzhou, but then he realized that things were bad. At some point in time, the cultivators in Daotong and Qinzhou's camp in the Yi Kingdom, they were all gone. LV Xingyang finally realized his fear, because this meant that Daotong and Qinzhou had tacitly agreed to this. Daotong and Qinzhou wanted to change dynasties. Then came the war between Qing and Yi that lasted for several years. In the intervening years, something else happened. The emperor sat deep in the palace. Seeing the battle reports from the front lines that were not optimistic, he was naturally not in a good mood. Therefore, he often went there to relax. He pretended to be an ordinary person and walked in the streets of Wei City. He saw many people and things. The pressure of the subjugation of his country and the worry for the future finally allowed him to seriously experience the sufferings of the common people. He knew how the common people lived their days, years, and lives cautiously. This gave him a unique temperament. He had the noble and imposing aura of an emperor, but he also had the magnanimous aura of someone who cared about the country and the people. Then he met a demon. The demon's name was Bai Yunqin. LV Xingyang was a handsome man, and he had a special temperament that few people in the world possessed. On the other hand, Bai Yunqin and her maidservant had always been wandering around the world, and they loved all kinds of interesting and novel things. She quickly liked the last emperor of Yi dynasty. Although a demon's liking was different from a human's liking, no one knew if Bai Yunqin treated him as a special plaything. But the demoness finally knew his identity and troubles. She realized that she had encountered an interesting matter that was hard to come by in 1,000 years. LV Xingyang also knew that this woman was not a human, but a powerful demon. He asked Bai Yunqin if she could help him protect his kingdom. Once the world was settled, he would worship her with the incense of the entire Yi Kingdom. The change of a dynasty was hard to come by in 1,000 years, so it was very interesting. Bai Yunqin happily agreed. And then, this Bai Yunqin also disappeared. What happened next was recorded in detail in the history books. The Yi Kingdom was destroyed. Wei City was broken. The city was massacred. And Emperor Yi died in the Purple Gold Palace. Li Yunqin also knew that what happened before was probably not made up. After killing Yunzi, Bai Yanjun once told him why he was helping the Ghost Emperor. According to what Bai Yanjun said, he owed the Ghost Emperor LV Xingyang a favor. Now Bai Yunqin's words and Bai Yanjun's words confirmed each other. Bai Yunqin said these words for a long time. Her tone was calm and a little jumpy. It could be seen that when she recalled the time she spent with Emperor Yi, she felt it was a happy memory. When she stopped, it was already noon. But the 3 demons were in the lake. They didn't feel hot. Instead, they felt cool. Li Yunxin narrowed his eyes in thought. He couldn't help but ask, does it have anything to do with the portrait in the ruined temple on Qingzhou's Goddess Mountain? Bai Yunxin thought. I don't know. Li Yunxin nodded. He thought about it and asked again. So you're saying that the reason you helped me and the Ghost Emperor stop the people from the Sword Sect was because you owed Lu Zhunyang a favor? Then the question is, you promised to help LV Zhunyang. Why did you disappear? My adoptive father didn't allow it. Li Yunxin thought Bai Yunxin needed some time to decide whether to tell him or not. He didn't expect that she would say it without hesitation. I didn't know the reason at that time. I only heard LV Zhunyang's words and thought it was the rebellion of the refugees. But after I promised him, I realized it was the general trend of the world. Those people wanted to change the dynasty, but my adoptive father didn't say why. Li Yunxin understood that the those people Bai Yunxin mentioned referred to Daotong and Qinzhou. This and the destruction of the Yi dynasty hundreds of years ago made him frown. He felt something was wrong. It was not that he was paranoid, but the old capital of the Yi dynasty was in the city of Wei. The dragon soul was in the Dongting near the city of Wei. The Lord Dongting was also in the Dongting. Bai Yunxin also came to the Dongting. Recently, everything happened near the city of Wei. So many people and things happened in such a small area. Li Yunxin felt that these seemingly unrelated things that happened in different periods and forces actually all revolved around one thing or one reason. Now he knew more and more, but he was also more and more confused. Every time he felt that he was about to reach the answer to the riddle, he would find that the so-called answer to the riddle was actually just a factor of that matter, just before the blink of an eye. The last emperor of the Yi dynasty, LV Zhunyang, disrespected the portrait on the Goddess Mountain. Then it rained heavily in the blink of an eye. The refugees revolted, and he was abandoned by Daotong and Qinzhou. There must be something fishy about it. Now Li Yunxin was the Dragon King. He knew what the rain was all about. Dragons could all reign, but their abilities were different. For example, he was a dragon's son in the realm of truth, and he cultivated Taoism. He gathered so many grievances in the city of Wei to make a storm. It was not hard, but it was not easy either. With his Taoism, he could make a light rain covering the entire city of Wei and Dongting. He could also make a moderate rain with a smaller coverage. If he made a storm, it could only cover the city of Wei. He thought it was impossible for him to make a super storm that lasted for 7 days and 7 nights. He didn't know who could do it. He didn't belong to this world before. He used to see the weather cloud picture, a big earth covered with white clouds. The big ones were as big as a continent, and the small ones were as big as several provinces. Therefore, it was hard for him to imagine that no matter how powerful a demon was, could he make a super heavy rain covering almost half of a country and lasting for several days. There were dragon kings dressed up as demons everywhere in the world. But most of those dragon kings were of the water nationality, and they were born with the ability to make clouds and rain. However, it was also limited. A dragon king in a small river might be able to produce a large area of light rain every month if he exerted all his strength. Fortunately, there were many demons, and the quantity could offset the quality. Taoist priests could also pray for rain. But if they prayed for rain, it was pure hooliganism. Taoist priests themselves couldn't make clouds and rain. In Li Yunxin's view, this was easy to understand. Rain clouds that were usually very low. When you looked up, you would feel that they were on the roof of your house, and you could touch them by raising your hand. In fact, they were 1 or 2 kilometers high. Those Taoist priests of wills and emptiness realm, who lived in Jianghu couldn't even fly, let alone affect the condensation of water vapor in such a high sky, especially on a super large scale. But they couldn't. But the local water nationality demons could. It was easy to distinguish when demons made rain. The clouds were thin and low, and most of them were 100 or 200 meters high. It wouldn't last long, and the rain wouldn't be very heavy. Therefore, Taoist priests burned magic figures and called those water nationality demons who were born with the ability to make rain. Since this kind of demon could become the dragon king of an area, it meant that he was content with his lot. They wanted incense for cultivation and human worship. Taoist priests represented Daotong, and they practiced the divine mind method. They had an advantage in fighting, and they had a huge force behind them. Here they wanted to call for wind and rain. If the demon really didn't cooperate, they would use magic figures and flying swords to kill it. And then they would say that it was this demon who caused trouble here in the past, which was why there was a drought. Where could they go to argue? Therefore, Li Yunqin saw demons making rain as hard labor, and Taoist priests making rain as hooliganism. Therefore, he was thinking that LV Junyang touched the portrait in the goddess mountain temple, and then it rained for 7 days and 7 nights. Was this man-made or just a coincidence? If it was a coincidence, then why? Daotong suddenly wanted to get rid of the Yi dynasty and build a new Qing dynasty. Thinking like this, he quickly grasped the key point. If they didn't like the LV family as the emperor, they could just replace the LV family. This sounded ridiculous in his world, but no one dared to say it here. The emperors of this world were more like professional managers under Daotong and Kenzo. If the immortals with supreme power didn't like this manager, then they could just tell him to get out and replace him with someone else. Why did they have to make the people angry and start a war? It should be known that Daotong and Kenzo hoped for peace and prosperity in the world, and for the people to reproduce. But the war hundreds of years ago, everyone in the Qing kingdom now knew how tragic it was. 9 out of 10 rooms in the prefecture were empty. From the uprising of the refugees to the destruction of Weidu, the population was almost halved. This was half of the population of a country. Chapter 247. So Li Yunqin thinks the key is the half of the population. Now he knew that man was a good thing, and so was life. Daotong and Kenzo can get fresh blood from people. They can also kill. So many people had died, so much resentment, they couldn't just let it dissipate in vain. If Daotong and Kenzo kill people for the resentment, they will be evil cults. Now they kill people in the city of Wei. Maybe they will ask someone else to take the blame, or find other excuses. But it is hard to find an excuse to kill people in the Yi kingdom. In that case, changing dynasties would be a very, very good method. They didn't kill people. The problem is, why do they need so many dead people? The more he thinks, the more frightened he is. Now he knows the past and also the past of Bai Yunqin and Liu Junyang. It shows that Bai Yunqin is clean and has nothing to do with Daotong and Kenzo. He is a little relieved and stands up. Since it is like this, I have to discuss something with you. People of Daotong may want to destroy Dongting, the dragon soul, and me. I need your help. When Bai Yunqin was speaking, the servant girl had been silent. Now she finally spoke. She pouts and rolls her eyes at Li Yunqin. Why should I help you? This little maid was most likely very favored. But Li Yunqin is not in the mood to argue with her. He just looks at Bai Yunqin. Seeing her think for a while, he lowers his eyes. How? I don't know what will happen in the lake if the dragon soul is taken away, but I'm afraid that people of Daotong will notice the strange phenomenon and take action in advance. Li Yunqin says, I hope you can take away the dragon soul when my plan succeeds. Hearing his words, the little maid stares at him. She looks at him for a while and says, Well, you are a demon now. Humph, you were a human before. You are so evil. My miss left late. If she got hurt, who could she go to? Bai Yunqin only looked at him without saying a word. The maidservant helped her say the question that she found difficult to ask. Li Yunqin was silent for a while, then stood up. He looked down at Bai Yunqin and her maidservant. The two demonesses in human form looked petite under the sunlight, as if they were two powerless ladies from rich families. He let this feeling linger in his heart for a while and said, If I can escape unscathed, I will find a way to settle your marriage. The maid was taken aback. She first turned to look at Bai Yunqin, then at Li Yunqin. Then she jumped up like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Do you know what you're talking about? Huh? However, Li Yunqin was still looking at Bai Yunqin, who was sitting quietly. No matter what reason you have to accept your adoptive father's arrangement, I will find a way to settle your marriage. I mean, I will not leave any future trouble and solve it completely. The young maidservant snorted. You are so arrogant. Li Yunqin turned to look at her and smiled. Little girl. Little girl, you and your miss helped me before. I remember that. But if you make trouble again, I will throw you into the lake. The maidservant followed Bai Yunxin. It was probably the first time someone talked to her like this. She was furious and grinned, showing her sharp demon teeth. How dare you? Li Yunxin let out a sigh and casually grabbed her. He was so tall that he almost lifted the young maidservant up. He lifted her up and patted her chest 3 times at lightning speed. Then he exerted more force. Like a cannonball, the little maid was thrown far, far away by him. After 2 breaths of time, a needle-like column of water appeared where the sky and the water met. Bai Yunxin did not stop him. She just looked at him quietly. After Li Yunxin patted his hands again, he looked up and said, "My adoptive father is the golden-winged rock king. Do you know what you just said?" Li Yunxin smiled. Where there is a will, there is a will. Although that girl is talkative, she wanted my help last night. I'm just a monster in the real realm. Compared to the rock king, I'm probably as weak as an ant. But now that she's hinting at me in such an earnest way, it means that I can help her with this, right? I thought about it for a whole night. I feel that helping you is also helping myself. So don't refuse me. Why don't you promise me to help you, and then promise me to help me? Everyone will be happy and mutually beneficial. Isn't that perfect? Bai Yunxin was silent for a while. Then she smiled. Ah, you are a demon in the true state, she said in a low voice. Her tone was like a person sighing in a low voice. It had the strange slyness of a demon. Okay, she said again. At the same time, she stood up and looked at Li Yunxin. I will take the dragon soul in 10 days. 10 days, is that enough for you? Li Yunxin frowned slightly. It's a little short. The demoness laughed and flew up to the cloud. If you can't do it in 10 days, how can you help me in the future? She waved her hand again. The little black donkey on the grassland was rolled up to the cloud. At the same time, 2 black dots fell from the sky. Li Yunxin hurriedly dodged. When he looked again, it was the black donkey that was scared when it was rolled up to the sky. Chapter 248. Because of the fire, Weiqing became dry. Weiqing used to be Weicheng. Weicheng was not a lone city. There were roads leading to all directions. It was also the economic and cultural center of the river region, with a lot of goods passing through it every day. Now that Weiqing was destroyed, the other prefectures were naturally affected. Even if the emperor did not want to care about this, he still had to ask. Therefore, people from the neighboring prefectures came to ask. The Taoists of Lengye Cave only sent a low-level disciple to deal with them. That disciple only said 4 words. Demons are causing trouble. Therefore, the officials nodded and left as if they were granted amnesty. Whether it was demons or other reasons, who would want to deal with those people at this time? The headmaster of Lengye Cave, Kuan Wuzi, stood on the cloud and looked at the ground below him. From his point of view, Weiqing was just a small red square. The square was surrounded by densely packed bright spots, glistening under the sunlight like countless gems. Those bright spots were the mirror-like array that Yu Meng and the rest saw when they escaped from Weiqing. All the vitality within a few miles was sucked away. The entire burning Weiqing, and the hundreds of thousands of souls in the city, became the core driving force of the array. A strong force gathered in the array, waiting to be unleashed. Kuan Wuzi looked at this scene and sighed. The Taoist beside him said, "Headmaster, you already have a plan. Why are you still sighing?" Kuan Wuzi was silent for a while, then said, "Once Weiqing was destroyed, hundreds of thousands of people died. I feel guilty." The Taoist was slightly stunned, as if he did not expect the headmaster to sigh because of this. He thought for a while, then comforted. Everyone in the world knows that Daotong and Kinzo take care of the people. They won't think of anything else. Originally, it was to incite the anger of the people, making it difficult for demons to stand in the world. Isn't this killing 2 birds with 1 stone? Kuan Wuzi shook his head. Saying that Weiqing was destroyed by demons is just a rumor. Now that it is spread around the world, I'm afraid it will become a calamity in my heart. Human lives are one thing, but if this calamity really comes, I'm afraid it will come in a threatening manner. Forget it, let's not talk about this anymore. Kuan Wuzi thought for a while, and looked down at his feet. It's a pity for that Li Yunxin. If he can really pursue the Tao, he is also a talent. The Taoist priest beside him fell silent. Then, a flash of resentment appeared on his face. Then he said, "The sect master was indeed thinking too much before. Sometimes a man's strength is limited." Kun Wuzi understood what he was talking about. Previously, he was worried that Li Yunxin might obstruct them and ruin the layout of the cave near the city of Wei. But in recent days, it seemed that Li Yunxin really didn't have a solution. There was news from Yunshan. Although Black Cat Demon and Rooster Demon were stubborn and obstinate, they still managed to learn a little about Li Yunxin from their words. Although his parents were extremely talented, and he himself was also a capable person, at least he was not beyond the imagination of common sense. Previously, because they underestimated the enemy too much, and he was good at playing tricks, a transcendent state cultivator and a true state cultivator fell into his trap. But his good luck could only go so far. Yes, Kun Wuzi thought for a while and sighed. Previously, I thought that he might have a way to unlock the Dongting inhibition. But now, I think I overestimated him. He might be able to escape, but for the overall situation, he is like a breeze blowing on the mountain. It won't affect the overall situation. The Taoist priest beside him continued. Right now, our target is the demon, not just him alone. Hey, I suppose a man like him must have been so proud and conceited that he would never have thought that one day. He would have been destroyed in passing by us. I would have liked to see his eyes before he died, and what they would have been like. Kun Wuzi glanced at him. He knew that the cultivator beside him was going through the trial of losing his mind. Therefore, he would not hide the most mean and vicious emotions in his heart. Fortunately, his cultivation was quite profound, and he was just trying to act fast with his tongue. Those who did not have enough cultivation would end up in a more miserable situation. Because of more and more regrets and jealousy, they would lose themselves completely and fall into some terrible emotions. Finally, they would fall into the demon's path. Siyuan, gather your mind. Kun Wuzi said to him. The Taoist priest's name was Siyuan, and his Taoist name was Fei Kongzi. He was 63 years old this year, and he had already reached the advanced level of Zhenren, the second level of the 3 realms of Zhenren. For mortals, 63 years old was considered 60 years old, but for a Zhenren who could live for hundreds of years, he was a young man. He had almost spent the past 63 years in Yunshan, and he was indeed a young man. Fei Kongzi was not worried about the headmaster's worries. He smiled, but there was obvious hatred in his smile, which was rare among cultivators. I can't gather my mind during the trial of losing my mind, headmaster. This trial is probably the last chance for me to experience the pleasure of the mortals before I enter the Xian state. Therefore, I don't want to gather my mind. My junior martial sister Ling Kongzi was harmed by Li Yunxin, and she lost her body. Even though she is not willing to become my Dao companion, my feelings for the mortals are real. After I pass the trial of losing my mind, it will be hard for me to be moved again. I might as well take this chance to indulge myself. Once I succeed, I will find Li Yunxin and let him have a taste of what I am experiencing now. Kun Wuzi looked at his expression and said, Your junior sister and your martial uncle Yu Yunzi probably thought the same way in the past. That Li Yunxin is, after all, a genius. You have to be careful. Fei Kongzi tilted his head and smiled. He looked very much like a mortal, but his smile didn't last long, because he and Kun Wuzi saw a strange phenomenon in the distance. They stood on clouds and looked down at all living beings from high up in the sky. There were no clouds in the distance, and the sun was high up in the sky. The sky was blue like the ocean. In such a background, a ripple suddenly appeared in the void. The transparent ripple was especially eye-catching in the eyes of cultivators. Kun Wuzi and Fei Kongzi frowned at the same time and shouted, Who is it? Profound realm cultivators were supposed to be calm and indifferent, and their expressions wouldn't change even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of them. But the problem was, even profound realm cultivators hadn't seen such an escape technique. A cultivator naturally couldn't be proficient in all the techniques in the world, but just like what Li Yunxin said in the past, many things had the same principles, and you would always know why it was like this. And now, the reason why profound realm cultivator Kun Wuzi lost his composure and shouted was because he couldn't see through the opponent's technique. The person quickly revealed himself. Or rather, it was just a wandering soul. A wandering soul without a body should be a Een god, or a ghost cultivator. But Kuan Wuzi didn't feel the resentment that was unique to ghost cultivators from this wandering soul. Sect Master Kuan Wuzi, this semi-transparent wandering soul bowed in the air. This place was already 1,000 meters in the sky, and the wind was very strong. But this wandering soul seemed to be outside of heaven and earth, and didn't move at all. My name is Lin Liangji, greetings Sect Master Kuan Wuzi. The wandering soul said his name, and then moved forward slightly. The two of them were 100 meters apart. But the amazing eyesight of cultivators allowed them to see the appearance of the other party clearly. Kuan Wuzi frowned slightly. He stared at him carefully for a while. This wandering soul was semi-transparent, but his original appearance could be seen. He was a middle-aged man of average height, and didn't have a beard. There was nothing special about his face, and there were no obvious wounds on his body. His expression was indifferent, and there was even a trace of a smile, as if he was a fellow Taoist who greeted him on the cloud mountain. The Langya Heaven's Sect Master said in a deep voice, "Who are you?" Did a fellow Taoist turn into a ghost cultivator? It was very rare for a Taoist to die and turn into a ghost cultivator, because Daotong and Kenzo didn't want the heavenly heart technique to be spread out, and demons could also learn the great Tao. Lin Liangji laughed. It's not what you think. Although I also cultivate the heavenly heart technique, I don't belong to Daotong or Kenzo. Sect Master Kuan Wuzi doesn't know me, but I know you. This time I came to ask you some questions, and I hope you can answer them. Kuan Wuzi realized that Lin Liangji's tone was light, but the meaning behind it was very tough. At this time and place, he suddenly appeared in front of the Langya Heaven's Sect Master, claiming that he had some questions to ask you. No matter how you looked at it, it didn't seem to be a good intention. But Kuan Wuzi was silent for a while, and then smiled slightly. Ask first. Forget it. I will ask you about your background. The wandering soul who called himself Lin Liangji didn't seem to care about the threat in Kuan Wuzi's words, and actually asked, I know that the big tactical array set by Sect Master Kuan Wuzi is the life-killing Big Dipper array. Using the demon power of the demons as a guide, the wish power of hundreds of thousands of dead souls in the city is channeled into the array. It is said that it is very powerful, and one blow can kill a cultivator at the peak of the profound realm. Now you claim that you want to use it to deal with the inhibition of Dongting, but it is actually a cover. The reason why Kuan Wuzi pretended to open the restriction to take the dragon soul was because he wanted to summon the great demons from all directions to stop this matter. The great demons might not be willing to do so, but since the divine dragon had given the order, they had no choice but to obey. Or the dragon will come in person. No matter what, when the time comes, Sect Master Kuan Wuzi will give the order. Or kill a few big demons of the true realm, or the profound realm, or simply seriously injure the dragon. It will be a good deal with no loss. Am I right? Kuan Wuzi thought for a while, raised his hand, stroked his beard, and nodded slightly, yes. But since you know so much, I'm afraid you can't leave today. Lin Liangji hurriedly smiled and waved his hand. Don't worry, Sect Master. I still have something to say. It's just that you want to destroy Dongting, the demons, and even the Shinryu. Have you thought about the translucent jade slip? As far as I know, the translucent jade slip is with Li Yunxin. I'm afraid you want to destroy that treasure too. Kuan Wuzi was stunned, but then he snorted. I don't know what you are talking about. Lin Liangliang showed a tolerant smile. You are just pretending. My junior fellow apprentice Qing Liangliang used to be a close friend of Taoist Yunzi, the head of the Siyuan Temple in Dongting. I have also reminded him several times in the city of Wei. Unfortunately, he was headstrong and finally died in the hands of Li Yunxin. Taoist Yunzi also knows about the translucent jade slip. How can Sect Master Kuan Wuzi not know about it? That day, you talked with Li Yunxin for a long time in Yunzhong, and he also told you about it. Now you want to destroy the translucent jade slip. Aren't you afraid that the two saints will hate you and kill you? Kuan Wuzi's eyes locked on the wandering soul who called himself Lin Liangliang. He stared at him for a long time, and then said in a deep voice, "You are well informed. You seem to have nothing to fear. If you are Li Yunxin's sect master, you are mistaken." Lin Liangliang smiled and shook his head. "I am not Li Yunxin's friend. On the contrary, I might be his enemy. I just really want the translucent jade slip. Of course, it would be best if I could kill him. Sect master, you don't have to worry about which force I am from. We have many people in Daotong, and even in your Langi cave heaven. It's just that you haven't discovered them yet. I don't have any ill intentions. I just want to know that since you have reached this stage, can you cooperate with us? Wait until we capture Li Yunxin and get his translucent jade slip. Then you can do your own things." In Kuan Wuzi's eyes, this person's request was really arrogant. But it was this kind of arrogance that forced him to treat it seriously. Unless he was a madman, no one would dare to be so arrogant in front of a mysterious realm sect master. Kuan Wuzi frowned. "Cooperation like this? If we really cooperate like you said, and you go to capture Li Yunxin first, it will delay our plan to exterminate the demons. What should we do?" Lin Liangliang didn't mind and smiled. What sect master wants to do is to start a war with the demons in the world. Compared to what we want to do, this kind of thing is just a cloud. Kuan Wuzi was so angry that he laughed. Starting a war with the demons involves the people of the world and the fate of humanity. Are you talking about a cloud? He was waiting for Lin Liangliang to say something that could help him speculate. But the other party suddenly became silent. It was as if his good temper and patience had been used up, and he didn't want to say anything more. Lin Liangliang's expression became calm, and his smile disappeared. He looked at Kuan Wuzi. "Sect master, you talk too much nonsense. I only want to reply, to agree or to disagree." Such rude words caused Kuan Wuzi to lose his patience. He decided to capture this person first. No matter why he was so arrogant, Daotong had enough power and capital to wake him up. Kuan Wuzi sneered. "You overestimate yourself." Then his sleeves suddenly fluttered, and he was about to take out a talisman. At this moment, he heard Lin Liangliang say calmly, "Kill him." Kuan Wuzi was surprised for a moment. Because the other party's words seemed to be directed at someone else, this meant that the other party had set up an ambush here. He immediately released his divine sense and scanned the surroundings. But there were only him, Fai Yunzi, and Lin Liangliang in the sky within a radius of 100 miles. There was no ambush. The other party was bluffing. But at the next moment, Kuan Wuzi's body suddenly exploded in the sky. Even his flesh and blood turned into ashes in an instant, leaving no trace behind. This was because when he released his divine sense, the life and death Big Dipper formation, that was formed by the 335 appraisal formations around Weiqing City, suddenly shot out a ray of light that was as thin as a hair. This ray of light was so thin that it was hard to distinguish in the dark. But it hit Kuan Wuzi's body. The indescribably strong body of a cultivator of the mysterious realm instantly turned into ashes. Kuan Wuzi, the head of the Langi cave, died. Chapter 249. The gale caused by the explosion of Kuan Wuzi's body lasted for half an hour before it dissipated. If it was on the ground, this gale would have destroyed all man-made structures within a radius of 100 miles, leaving not a single trace behind. However, at this moment, they were thousands of meters high in the sky. Only 2 people were affected by the gale, Fei Yunzi and Lin Liangji. But the 2 of them didn't seem to be afraid of the gale. They even talked in the gale. Lin Liangji frowned. He didn't seem to be happy that he killed Kuan Wuzi so easily. "Did you catch him?" Fei Yunzi was silent for a while. His eyes were absent-minded as if his soul was wandering the world, looking for something. After 3 breaths, his eyes lit up again, and he became alive again. "No, it's troublesome." He frowned and sighed. The mysterious realm is indeed unfathomable. Fei Yunzi was of the same generation as Yunzi, and was regarded by Kuan Wuzi as the candidate for the next heavenly grotto sect master. At this moment, he was talking to the mysterious Lin Liangji, as if he was talking to an old friend. Lin Liangji thought for a while, but his body was destroyed by the life-killing Big Dipper formation. His soul was also injured, right? Yes. But we didn't expect him to be able to escape. Now, it's hard to say whether he has any protective magic treasure or not. Just now, when his body was destroyed, I sensed a trace of his soul heading east. Fei Yunzi squinted his eyes and looked east. He sighed. Forget it. A trace of his soul. It won't be a bad thing to become a ghost cultivator without any consciousness. These days, I had to help him with the formation, and also did something under his eyes to accumulate power for this attack. Mistakes are inevitable. Lin Liangji accepted his explanation. The two of them didn't speak anymore. They stayed in the air for a long time, until the gale in the sky gradually dissipated. Lin Liangji floated forward, and stood a few meters away from Fei Yunzi. Then he solemnly cupped his hands and bowed to Fei Yunzi. He said then, Junior Marshal Brother Fu Liangji, you have been in Daotong for 46 years. Now you have finally succeeded. You have worked hard. Congratulations. Fei Yunzi, who was called Lucky Liangzi by Lin Liangzi, was silent for a while before a mocking smile appeared on his face. Is this considered a success? According to the elders, this was only a small step. But he raised his head and let out a long breath. You've worked hard indeed. Next step. I still want Junior Marshal Brother to continue lurking in Daotong, Lin Liangji said. But not as a Fei Yunzi, but as a Kunwuzi. Fei Yunzi was slightly startled. Kunwuzi? He is in the profound realm. He frowned. I possess Fei Yunzi, and helped him cultivate from the emptiness realm to the true realm. Now that I'm the son of Kunwu, I can say that I'm restraining my power, and I can avoid revealing any flaws during the battle. But this physical body, don't you know that the physical body of someone who has mastered the mystical realm is already very difficult to destroy? Just now, the life and death grand formations attack had consumed the yang qi of 100,000 people. How can I disguise myself as the son of Kunwu with this body? Lin Liangji smiled and tossed something out. This thing looked very small, as big as a fingernail. But when it was in front of Fei Yunzi, it had become as big as a person. And this was indeed a person. It was the son of Kunwu. In other words, it was a person who looked exactly the same as the son of Kunwu. One of the elders offered his body. Lin Liangji said with a tone of admiration, awe and emotion. In terms of strength, it's even stronger than the body of Kunwu. You can use this body, disguise as the son of Kunwu, and continue to stay at the Dongting. When we catch Li Yunxin, we will act according to Kunwu's plan. Kill as many demons as they come. It's best. Lin Liangji laughed. Ask Daotong Kenzo and demons to kill them all. Fei Yunzi stared at the body in front of him for a long time, and then sighed helplessly. After this breath, the body of Fei Yunzi suddenly lost its vitality and fell from the sky. Lin Liangji raised his hand and smashed it in the air. Kunwuzi came back to life. He coughed a few times, moved his hands and feet and sighed again. Alas, when will it end? After thinking for a while he said, Fu Liangji. It's been a long time since someone called me that. I almost forgot my own name. Now when I think about our Taoist name again, I always feel weird. Lin Liangji frowned and looked at him, saying warily, the elders have their own reasons. Junior brother, your words. I don't like it. Don't let the people and things in Daotong blind your heart. Now that the world's catastrophe is coming, junior brother, don't stand on the wrong side. Fei Yunzi was stunned. Catastrophe? Didn't the elders say they're still? Lin Liangji didn't want to talk about this topic anymore. He smiled coldly and said, do your job. Our time is coming soon. Li Shan was walking in the lake. According to Li Yunxin, his real body was an electric eel, not an ordinary eel. But he didn't care about it. Demons rarely cared about their origin. According to Li Yunxin, he wanted to gather the demons in the lake, and then do a big thing. This big thing was a part of Wei River Dragon King's plan. He wanted to unify the demons, and then be used by Dragon King. He chose to go to his former cave Shipwreck Valley. Although most of the experienced demons there had been killed by Li Yunxin, there were still some small monsters who had just matured. He gathered these small monsters, and asked them to pass his orders to the lake. It would be much easier than doing it himself. After all, the big demons in the lake had been plowed clean. His reputation as the 10th young master was even more well-known than that of Wei River Dragon King in Dongting. He first ordered an eel monster with a serious tail called Baju. Its personal ability was not bad, and it could transform into a human shape. It was supposed to be a monster general, but it was just too lazy to pay attention to it. He didn't expect that it was still alive. Now it could be used. He first told Baju what he was going to do, and gave it a lot of tokens. Then, he ordered some useful little demons to carry out his orders, and go to various places in the lake. He only came back when he met some monsters who made trouble. Otherwise, Dongting was so huge and wide that he couldn't do it alone in a month. Baju left after getting the order. It disappeared at the bottom of the dark lake in the blink of an eye. Li Shan waited at ease. He waited until 2 days later. All the demons in the lake that could be counted had gathered together. Lord Dongting had been operating in the lake for thousands of years, and the lake was rarely disturbed by Taoists and swordsmen. Because of the dragon soul and Lord Dongting in the lake, the monster energy was naturally strong. Therefore, there were a lot of water monsters in Dongting. Not counting those killed by Li Yunxin that night, there were 300 demons who could transform into a human shape, gathering in front of Li Shan now. It was a terrifying number for the world of Dongting. Li Shan used to want to see this result the most. Let the demons in Dongting surrender to him. Now half of this wish had been fulfilled, because the other half belonged to the Wei River Dragon King. When he got out of his shipwreck valley, he saw those aquatic demons gathered together and whispered to each other. He didn't know what they were talking about. He also saw the eel monster called Baju came to him and said, "10th young master, everyone is here. Just wait for 10th young master's instruction on what to do next." This Baju was eloquent. He was even clearer than those small monsters who gave orders before. Li Shan thought that he had buried his talent in the past, but now he got what he deserved today. He glanced at the first group of monsters in the water, and then he frowned slightly. What did Toad King and the old turtle say? Baju came forward with a smile and said, "10th young master. 10th young master was right. I went to the 2 kings with your token. Although they didn't stop me, they only thought that the demons under them were not yours. They told us to look elsewhere." Li Shan sneered. "I had expected this." "Humph, forget it. Just tell them to keep their heads down." Unexpectedly, the little monster Baju didn't finish his words. He continued with a smile. "Young master, you have a good foresight. But I thought that there were many demons under the 2 kings, and most of them were brave and fierce. If they couldn't be used by me, wouldn't it delay your important matter? So I killed the 2 kings, now the demons under them are also here." Li Shan didn't understand for a while, and he was stunned for a while. Then he used the electric light to check the demons carefully. 200 or 300 demons were densely covered the bottom of the water. It was very difficult to find a few people. However, Li Shan had also dealt with Toad King and Turtle King. He knew that the demons under them were all wearing hard armor. So he found them soon. Sure enough, the demons under them were also there. He was stunned for a while, and turned to look at Baju. She sized him up from head to toe. "What did you just say? You killed the 2 kings?" Baju laughed. "That's right." Then he stretched out his hand, and took out 2 heads from behind him. They were the heads of the 2 kings. But this naked creature had a scaly face, and a rather flat nose. His facial features barely resembled a human's, but his mouth was wide and some sharp teeth were exposed. He wore a worn-out waterproof suit, and carried a bag on his back. He held an iron ore in his hand. He didn't know where he found it. Such a little monster killed the 2 kings. Even if he, the 10th young master, personally took action, he couldn't guarantee that he could kill the 2 kings within 2 days without any injuries. Li Shan was a demon, so he wasn't as smart as a human. But no matter how slow-witted he was still a big demon. At this moment, he realized that something was wrong. Then small electric lights appeared around him. "Who are you?" He couldn't have such a guy under him. With such tyrannical strength, it was enough for him to become a demon king. But Baju was still laughing. "10th young master, what are you talking about? I have been following you for more than 200 years, but now I don't know you? Oh, no wonder. I didn't want to show my ability before the time was right. But now the good time has come. I want to advise the king not to miss the opportunity. Li Shan was more and more frightened when he listened to him. He quietly raised his monster power and was on guard, asking, "What opportunity? What opportunity?" Baju laughed. "Of course it's a good opportunity to catch Li Yunxin. That way River Dragon King Li Yunxin ruined our plan. Now he is in Dongting. If we catch him, it will be a great achievement." Li Shan's eyes widened, although he couldn't see anything with his eyes. "Who are you? If you don't tell me, don't blame me for being rude." Baju sighed with a smile. "10th young master. 200 years ago, you received our benefits and practiced the way of the will of heaven, so that you can have today's achievement. Now you don't know us? I will let you know that we are members of the Freemasonry Association. I have raised you for 200 years. Now you should know how to repay our kindness, right?" When Li Shan heard this, he was really stunned. The secret of 200 years ago? How did this little monster know? What he said was actually true. He was shocked for a moment and stood still. He just asked subconsciously, "How to repay our kindness?" Baju laughed. "10th young master, you can repay it yourself." Li Shan didn't figure out what the eel monster meant. The eel monster had already swung the mixed iron ore in his hand. Li Shan was blind. He only relied on the electric light on his body to perceive things. Normally, this moment should be more timely than watching. But who could expect? Li Shan, a monster in the transcendent state, couldn't keep up with the speed of this little monster. With a bang, Li Shan's head exploded. There was a loud bang at the bottom of the lake. Before the demons could figure out what was going on, the whole shipwreck valley turned red. After a long time, a demon suddenly appeared on the surface of the lake. It was Li Shan's appearance. This Li Shan stopped in midair for a moment, then shouted toward the water, "Listen to me. My demon General Baju didn't listen to my orders. I have killed him on the spot. If you don't obey, you will be like Baju." Another wave surged in the water. 200 to 300 monsters, some on top of the waves, some under the water, all responded. Li Shan laughed out loud 3 times and led the demons to the direction of Mount June. The monsters moved majestically, as if they weren't afraid of the evil dragon in the lake. They left a wide and long trail on the water, as if a huge ship had passed by. Originally, the birds were frightened, and the aquatic animals fled. But another person came out of the water. As soon as this person came out of the water, she immediately spat, and subconsciously wanted to comb her fur. But she was in human form, so she couldn't lick herself even if she turned around. Only then did he toss and turn on the water for a while, before he found a solitary reef protruding out of the water to land on. First, she shook her head to get rid of the water on her body, then stared at the direction of the monsters for a while. Then, an indescribable expression appeared on Sanhua's face. Even if Li Yunxin was here, he probably couldn't figure out what she was thinking. She first looked into the distance, then slowly moved her eyes to the sky. "Little trouble," she whispered to herself. No one knew who she was talking about. Humph, a little trouble. Ah, they are all the same. Chapter 250. The Li Shan transformed by the eel monster Nakaho is also a brave and ruthless character. He leads a group of monsters to Mount June. When he arrives at the water, his face changes and he shouts, my king, I've brought them all." Just now, when Nakaho killed Li Shan, it was at the bottom of 100 meters deep. At that depth, it's dark and there are many aquatic plants in Shipwreck Valley, so people can't see clearly. These aquatic creatures were born with poor eyesight. Therefore, no one knew that this 10th young Master Li Shan was a fake. They only thought that the 10th young Master Li Shan had killed him, because she was angry that Mauricio had done something unpleasant to her. He shouts like this 2 or 3 times, and Li Yunxin appears from the hall. First, he looks at these demons. They have all transformed into human beings. But they don't look like human beings. Then he looks at Li Shan. The look on his face is much more lively than before. At this moment, he is looking at Li Yunxin with a complacent face, as if he is asking for credit. He thinks for a moment and says straightforwardly, I summoned you here because I have something to do. And now Daotong outside the lake. Speaking of this, he suddenly realizes that it's unnecessary. These demons are not smart. It's already clever if they can say it clearly. If he tells them a lot of things about the life and death of the Daotong demons, they will probably be more confused. He doesn't explain those things but just says, well, let's cut the crap. You have to go out of the lake with me later. Out of the lake, go into the Wei River. Visit the monster kings near Dongting along the way, and tell them that Wei River Dragon King has something to discuss with them. He asks them to go to the Baiding Village Wilderness Forest by the lake. After saying this, he looks at those water monsters again, but they are still standing there in a daze. He doesn't know if they understand him or not, but Li Shan approaches and whispers, "My king, I'm afraid that these idiots are not good enough to do this kind of thing." Li Yunxin looks at him again and laughs. It's because they are stupid enough to do this. You've seen the likes of the Roving King and the Serpent King. In the beginning, they wanted to deal with me and sent messengers to inform me. They have been in the lake for hundreds of years, but they still suspect each other and don't care about me. How can I expect those demons outside the cave to unite? We just need to send a message to them, so that the people of Daotong will think that we are contacting the demon kings from all over the world to fight to the death with them. In this way, they will help me. Li Shan stood there in a daze for a while, as if thinking about the meaning behind Li Yunxin's words. After a while he said, "What do you want me to do for the king?" Li Yunxin glanced at him. "You seem to be very studious today." Li Shan hurriedly said, "I just want to share the burden of the king, so that I can have a good future in the future." Li Yunxin smiled. "That's the right way to think. Then, I'll also let you know, the Taoist priests of Daotong captured the small demons nearby. I heard that they used them to create a formation. However, they were probably afraid of trouble, so they did not attack the nearby great fiendish demons." "What are the great fiendish demons around here?" "Humph. They are just some guys who want to occupy the magpie's nest." Li Yunxin snorted angrily. "I am the Wei River Dragon King. The entire Wei River should be under my control. However, those things have occupied my territory. They don't even care about the Shinryu's Firebird. In the past, I was too lazy to care about them. But now, humph. Once the Taoist priests of Daotong notice that they are colluding with each other, they will definitely not sit back and do nothing. Now that the war between the demons and Daotong is imminent, what do you think they will do? Of course, they will kill those restless demon kings. Haha. In this way, I will use the means of those Taoist priests to clear all the demon kings nearby. In the future, who will dare to compete with me near Dongting? When I get through this tribulation, I will be the Wei River Dragon King in name, and in reality." Listening to Li Yunxin's words, Li Shan immediately claps his hands. "Your Majesty, you are really smart. Your means are brilliant. But the people of Daotong are going to destroy Dongting. In the future, they may stay here and refuse to leave. Even if you get the Wei River, I am afraid that you will not be able to control it in the future." Hearing his words, Li Yunxin smiles mysteriously. After thinking for a while, he seems to have made a decision. He squints at Li Shan and says, "You are worried about this. Well, I will also tell you about it so that you can do things for me dutifully. Don't have some stupid ideas. Do you know that I used to be a human?" Li Shan is stunned and says, "Your Majesty, what do you mean?" Li Yunxin laughed. "As long as you know, I am a demon now, but I used to be a human. Those Taoist priests of Daotong. How many people are there in total? They have residences in the cities in the secular world, but they are just famous big cities. Those small cities and small towns can't even be seen. Do you know? Daotong is short of manpower. It is said that there are many Taoist priests on Mount Yunshan, but they all want to cultivate Tao and don't want to get involved in secular affairs. So, now Daotong is going to conquer the world and take a lot of territory from demons. Do they just ignore it? They can ignore the places where there are people. The government will take care of it for them. There is too much yang energy in the human world, so it is difficult for demons to form. But the places where those demons used to live are mostly barren mountains and rivers. No one goes there. If we ignore it after conquering this place, new demons will appear in a dozen or decades. Hey, what should we do? Of course, we will find someone to manage it." Li Yunxin smiles proudly. "For example, the Wei River. I used to be a human. I always understand people's thoughts. When this thing is over, I will find the people of Daotong and tell them that I am still dedicated to Tao and willing to abandon the darkness for the light, to suppress the demons here and take charge of this place for them. As long as one is reasonable and understands the general situation, how could there be a single word no? This will be the general trend in the future. Li Yunxin exhales proudly. There are endless demons. The only people the orthodoxy could kill were those stubborn fools. And others like me will become the agents of Daotong. So, what are you afraid of? This Dongting is finished, but it doesn't mean that I will also be finished. Not only will I not be finished, but I will also be happier than before. I don't even need to hide anymore. Li Shan listens to him dumbfoundedly, and can't help clapping again. Wonderful, wonderful. Your Majesty, this is really a good plan. Being praised like this, Li Yunxin seems to be excited. Or maybe he thinks that Li Shan is also a talented person, so he complacently says, "Do you think it's just like this?" Hee. Although Daotong is strong, it may not be stronger than Shinryu. I will submit to them first and wait. Once they are defeated by Shinryu, it will be interesting. I am the son of a dragon, a demon of noble status. How can I really submit to Daotong? Everything I have done before is just feigning civility and waiting for the opportunity to fight back. At that time, the people of Daotong will get out of Dongting and Weishui River. Won't this place be mine? After saying this, he squints at Li Shan. This is called killing two birds with one stone. Those stupid demons. How can they understand this? Fake Li Shan listens to Li Yunxin telling his plan and sneers slightly in his heart. But he still keeps calm on the surface and only praises Li Yunxin for this good plan. Li Yunxin shows off for a while and seems to feel that he has won Li Shan's heart. He doesn't say anything more. First, he tells Li Shan to convey his meaning to the monsters, and then he uses his holy spell to take them out of the inhibition of Dongting. This too was a troublesome matter. His dragon palace is a very secret place. He is not as bold as Lord Dongting, who opens up his dragon palace as a new world and puts all the shrimps and crabs in it. Therefore, he has to use his holy spell to block the senses of those demons first. Then he takes them into the dragon palace and sends them out of the inhibition. Just like that, more than 4 hours passed. Demons in Dongting rarely go out of Dongting before, because they are all water monsters. This means that although they are in human form, they are still the happiest in the water. Moreover, some demons have natural holy spells, and they can only use the wind and waves. Now that they had come to the wilderness forest on land, many ignorant fiendish demons were complaining incessantly. Thanks to Li Shan running back and forth, they don't scatter. Fortunately, Dongting is next to Weishui River. It is a big lake formed by the Weishui Bay. These demons walk through the forest soon and come to the bank of Weishui River. They jump into the water hurriedly. During this period, some demons get excited and want to be distracted in the forest. Li Shan doesn't need to be ordered by Li Yunxin. He immediately kills them. Li Yunxin sees that he is smart and decisive, so he is relieved after the demons enter Weishui River. He only tells Li Shan to hide and wait by the water. He goes back to Dongting first, because he has something to do. Li Shan nods and agrees in a hurry. So, he is the only one left in the forest by Weishui River. The place where the demons enter the water is on the other side of the Sanhiku. There used to be no one here. Looking south, you can see Nanshan Mountain in the distance. The hottest time of the day has just passed, and the leaves of the plants are all withered. The steaming heat has not dissipated in the forest. The sun penetrates the sparse branches and leaves on the edge of the forest, sprinkling light spots on the ground. Such an environment is not comfortable for a low-level water monster. It is even a kind of torture. However, Li Shan raises his head and stares at the sun in the sky for a long time. He takes a deep breath of the air in the forest, which is full of the fragrance of plants. Then he lets out a satisfied ha. Then he slowly lies on the grass, which is slightly warm because of the heat. He stretches out his hands and feet and lies on the ground. After half an hour, Li Shan sits up again. First, he took out a talisman from his bosom, and then he burned it. The ashes dissipate, and he waits peacefully. After waiting for half an hour, A stream of light appears in the sky. The stream of light goes straight to the forest. It hovers over Li Shan's head for a while, and finally seems to find someone. So it falls down. It is Kunwazi. But naturally, it is a fake like Li Shan. It is Fa Yunzi, who is called Fu Liangzi by Lin Liangzi pretending to be Kunwazi. In the eyes of people who don't know, this scene is naturally very strange. The master of Lengye Cave of Daotong is standing on the grass. He looks down at a strange lake monster. And the lake monster is also sitting and looking up at him. The two of them look at each other for a while. Li Shan suddenly laughed and said, "You are doing very well. When we separated decades ago, you and I were both in the transcendent state. Now, I am just at the peak of the transcendent state. Senior apprentice brother, you are already. Ah." He suddenly sat up and stared at Kunwazi carefully for a while. His expression changed and he said, "Your body. What happened to it? Did you take over Kunwazi's body? How did you do it?" Kunwazi sighed and said, "It really is you. Sigh. I haven't seen you for many years. I almost forgot that your Taoist name is Tan Liangzi. This body of mine wasn't possessed. It was an elder who gave up his own body and gave it to me. You don't have to be too surprised. But now you sigh." He looked at the eel monster that he called Tan Liangzi with a look of pity. After a while he sighed and said, "You used to be a person who loved beauty. But now, you are trapped in this body. It is really hard on you." Li Shan smiled and said, "Body? Body is just a small matter. What I dislike the most is the rotten smell in the lake. In that place, I don't see the sun. I stay in the water for decades. I eat rotten meat and drink muddy water. I haven't seen such a scene for a long time. I was also obsessed and wanted to be a lake monster. It is good to be a Taoist like you. I eat well, wear well, and my state is also good." Kuan Wuzi smiled and didn't argue with him about this. Or maybe he felt that Li Shan had suffered for many years and did not know how to comfort him. He thought for a while and changed the topic. "Junior apprentice brother, you have suffered. But now, do you have any progress on your side?" Li Shan then said seriously, "I don't have any progress on my side. I just thought of you. I didn't know that you had become Kunwazi, but I knew that you must be by his side. And on my side, that Li Yunxin is planning something. I thought for a while and felt that this opportunity cannot be missed. So I disguised myself as a monster king in the lake. Listen to me carefully." So he told what Li Yunxin did in Dongting these days, and emphasized what Li Yunxin said to him before. Kunwazi listened, and his expression changed slightly. Then he was silent for a long time. His words have no flaws. He frowned and twirled his beard. "But how do you know that he didn't say it to coax you?" Li Shan smiled slightly. "First, he doesn't know that I am a fake. Second, senior apprentice, he even said that he used to be a human, so it must be true. Do you know about this?" Kunwazi thought for a while. "This is true. Kunwazi told me before, but he also told me not to look down on that Li Yunxin. Now that I've heard you say this, he does have some tricks up his sleeves, and is courageous enough. He asked Daotong to clean up for him, and then he reaped benefits from both sides. I don't know him very well, but if I think about it carefully, Kunwazi said that he is cunning. This proves it." Kunwazi shook his head. "If you didn't tell me these, I might have been fooled by him. So, what do you think we should do?" Chapter 251. Li Shan thought for a while and smiled. Li Yunxin wants to use Daotong and the demons for his own benefit. So why don't we go with the flow? The Elder Guild wants to kill him, so why don't we capture him? Senior brother, do you remember the order you gave us? It said that Li Yunxin is a dangerous person, and we have to kill him on the spot. However, there is one thing that I don't understand, and I think you don't understand either." Kuan Wuzi frowned. "What is it?" Li Shan didn't answer him immediately. Instead, he picked up a red flower on a tree branch and sniffed it. This action could be done by a beauty or a genius, but now Li Shan did it. One must know that Li Shan's face was originally quite comical. Now he looked even more comical. However, Kuan Wuzi's expression changed slightly, which turned into one of pity. He silently watched as Li Shan sniffed the flower and crushed it into red mud in his hand. He then continued, "Why did the Elder Council give the order to kill Li Yunxin? In the past, Li Yunxin had the clear jade scroll on him, and we didn't hesitate to use one of our connections in Daotong to kill his parents just to get that scroll. But now, we don't even want the scroll, and just want to kill him quickly. Senior brother, you should know what kind of existence the elders of the Elders' Council are. People like them. Why would they be afraid of a small Li Yunxin? What did he do in Weicheng? Kuan Wuzi frowned because of his words. After thinking for a while, he raised his head and said, Senior brother Lin Liangji told me before. He killed someone in Weicheng. That person was a son-in-law of the Yu family. He made the black medicine. As for the black medicine, senior brother Lin Liangji didn't have any evidence. He just guessed that Li Yunxin passed it to him. Now that I think about it, it should be one of Li Yunxin's hidden chess pieces. He suspected our existence and placed it on the table. In the end, we fell into his trap. If there is a reason, it should be because of this. Kuan Wuzi thought about it carefully and frowned. But for something like the black medicine, I really don't know why the elders would place such importance on it. Similarly, the pill cauldron sect of the prime clear lineage also has a similar dermic formulation. It's called gunpowder. It's made into pellets and supplemented with spiritual qi to injure people. In reality, its power isn't that great. Li Shan nodded. I'm also puzzled. However, there was still a difference between the two of them. Senior martial brother, think about it. Daodong's heavenly heart technique is a secret technique that cannot be passed down. It had been a few thousand years, but who had ever heard of a rogue Taoist learning that technique? The methods of the pill cauldron sect of the prime clear lineage should have been passed down in the pill cauldron sect for generations, like an ancestral memorial tablet, not daring to change it easily. However, when Li Yunxin taught the black medicine technique to the Yu clan's son-in-law, it might have spread among the common people. Li Shan looked at Kuan Wuzi. This is probably the difference. But even though this was the difference, I still didn't understand the deeper meaning behind it. The elders possess remarkable abilities, so why would they be afraid of this? So, I wanted to capture Li Yunxin alive and interrogate him about the crux of the matter. Kuan Wuzi was slightly stunned. Then he frowned and shouted at him in a deep voice. Junior martial brother, are you crazy? Do you want to disobey the elders' decree? Li Shan was silent for a while. Then a smile appeared on his face. It's like this, senior martial brother. I want to disobey the elders' decree. But who knows? Now, senior martial brother, you know. But if you don't say it, we'll capture Li Yunxin, interrogate him about the things we want to know, then kill him. The elders won't know. Could it be that senior martial brother won't keep the secret for me? Kuan Wuzi was stunned by his question again. After a long time, he said in a low voice, This isn't my problem. Junior martial brother, why are you doing this? You know how the elders look when they're angry. Li Shan maintained the smile on his face and stared at Kuan Wuzi for a while. Then his smile slowly disappeared. He clasped his hands behind his back and paced a few steps on the grass in the forest. Then he turned around and said, Why? Senior martial brother, have you been living well for the past few decades and forgotten about the past? Kuan Wuzi was stunned and didn't speak. Li Shan walked towards him expressionlessly. Finally, he stood face to face with Kuan Wuzi. Their chests were pressed together. They were so close that they could feel each other's breath coming out of their noses and mouths. Kuan Wuzi was in a stalemate with him for a while. He turned his face slightly, intending to avoid it. However, Li Shan raised his hands and held onto Kuan Wuzi's face, not letting him turn his head. If others were to see this scene, it would be hard to describe. A Taoist in his 50s was cupped by a funny-looking water monster. They really didn't know how to describe it. Kuan Wuzi frowned. However, he seemed to feel that such an expression wasn't appropriate and relaxed his brows. However, he still didn't know how to face Li Shan. He could only say, Junior martial brother, what are you doing? What are you doing? Someone found out. How would anyone find out here? Li Shan stared at Kuan Wuzi's face expressionlessly. Even this won't happen. After saying that, he used the wide and big mouth on his face to kiss Kuan Wuzi's mouth. At this moment, Kuan Wuzi finally couldn't take it anymore. He pushed Li Shan away and said anxiously and angrily, Junior martial brother, His body was even stronger than the body of a cultivator, who had reached the peak of the mystical realm. It was also newly obtained, and he couldn't control it as he wished. Thus, he used 20% of his strength in a moment of desperation. This eel demon was only at the peak of the transcendent realm. How could he withstand such strength? He was immediately pushed a dozen steps away and crashed into a huge tree behind him. The tree that needed 3 people to wrap their arms around shook from the impact, and a large amount of leaves fell down. Li Shan spat out a mouthful of blood. He had actually been seriously injured by Kuan Wuzi. Only then did Kuan Wuzi realize that something was wrong. He screamed and quickly rushed over to check on Li Shan's injuries. However, he heard Li Shan scream, "Don't come over." The leader of the Langya Heavenly Cave obediently stopped 3 to 4 steps away from Li Shan and didn't move forward anymore. However, looking at him now, he didn't even have the demeanor of a leader. He stood there with his hands and feet trembling, like a student who had done something wrong. He only knew how to say with a trembling voice, "Junior Marshal Brother. Junior Marshal Brother. I didn't mean it." Li Shan spat out another mouthful of blood. He actually leaned against the tree and sat down. He sneered. "Now do you know why?" Then he screamed again. "Look at what I look like now. Do you still remember what I looked like in the past? Do you still remember whether I was a man or a woman?" When these 3 sentences came out, Kuan Wuzi's face became even paler. "I wanted to kiss you just now, and you also felt disgusted." Li Shan laughed crazily. "Didn't you like this the most in the past? At that time, I was Yu Chanzi of the Soaring Heaven Sword sect, and you were my senior martial brother. You said that my beauty was unparalleled in the world. You said that you wanted to be with me forever. What about in the past? Do you still remember in the past? I was originally from the Chen nation and was born a woman. It was you who saw me, liked me and brought me to the Freemasonry. Until now, senior martial brother. Do you still remember what I looked like at that time? Don't you?" Li Shan stood up with the support of the tree. "You only remember that I'm Tan Liangzhu. What did you see me say just now? Haven't seen you for many years. You almost forgot my Taoist name? What about the words you said in the past? You had a great life in the Langya Grotto heaven and fell in love with that Ling Kongzi. You actually forgot my Taoist name." He wanted to continue, but he spat out another mouthful of blood and stopped talking. Kuan Wuzi's face became more and more bitter. After a long silence, his eyes actually became wet. He only said sorrowfully, "Junior martial brother. Junior martial brother. It's all my fault. But let me treat your injuries first, and then we can talk about it slowly, okay?" Li Shan stared at him for a long time before his face slowly softened and he sighed. "Okay." Kuan Wuzi hurriedly ran over and circulated his spiritual qi to protect his heart meridians. The 2 of them were speechless for a while, only watching the fiery red setting sun slowly set over the mountaintop. After half an hour, Li Shankai sighed again and said, "Sai, it's not a big deal. Sai, senior martial brother, this is why. I don't really care about those things in the past. It's just that I'm not resigned to it. You brought me into the Freemasonry, and I gained cultivation. Then, I was given a Taoist name, and became like this. We both gave up our bodies, and became wandering souls. And then we pretended to be one person after another. Who we were, where we were, who we were, and what we did with our identities. None of these are things that you and I can decide. I've already been 9 people. As each person, I've lived for decades or even centuries. Senior martial brother, do you know that sometimes I even forget myself? I'm asking you if you remember me. You probably don't remember what I looked like when I was a woman from the Chen nation. Chen Li. Do you know? I don't remember myself either. All these years, I've even forgotten that I'm a woman. Only when I see you do I remember the past." Li Shan's voice slowly turned bitter. "So I want to know why. The elders always say that the great calamity is coming, and that we're going to build a paradise. But these words have been said for hundreds and thousands of years. When exactly will it come? Humans. What is a human? What is a human? Sometimes, I think that the reason why I'm me is because someone remembers me and knows me. I also remember myself. I know my own experiences, memories, and feelings. But do we really have these things? Right now, I have the memories of when I was a disciple of the soaring heaven sword sect, Yu Chanzi. But now, I'm the lake demon Li Shan. Then who am I? Which one is me? Li Shan sighed. You see, even you can't bear my current appearance. And I'm a woman. Don't tell me I can endure it. At this point, his emotions finally calmed down. But he began to sob softly. A woman sobbing, looking delicate and pitiful. But now that he was an eel demon, he really couldn't be compared to the word delicate and pitiful. Seeing him like this, Kuan Wuzi subconsciously frowned again. But soon, he relaxed his frown, turned his head slightly, and hugged Chu Yang lightly. Good. Junior Marshal brother, I'll listen to you. Whatever you say, we'll do it. At most, I won't be Kuan Wuzi anymore. If anything happens, I'll take responsibility. After a while, Li Shan didn't say anything. At this time, the sky had already darkened. The forest was pitch black, and there were sounds of insects. This darkness made Kuan Wuzi feel more at ease. At least, he couldn't see the appearance of the person in his arms clearly. He could only think about the past, and his heart felt much more comfortable and soft. Then, Li Shan pushed him away and stood up. Senior Marshal brother, so I want to know what the elders are afraid of. We've worked for them for so long, but they only gave us a promise that we don't know when it will be fulfilled. This promise was also vague and unclear. So, I'm not afraid of working long and hard. I'm afraid that I'll be happy for nothing. Li Shan's voice gradually became firm. If I can't always be myself, then at least I need to know what my goal is. Kuan Wuzi was silent for a long time in the darkness. Then he sighed. All right. I know that you've suffered these years. But, Senior Marshal brother Lin Liangzi sighed. We can't let him know. Li Shan's voice became serious. We don't know what he's thinking, so we can't take any risks. But he told me previously that he wanted to capture Li Yunxin. Moreover, he was the one who killed the Yu family, so he knows more about the whole matter than we do. Li Shan thought for a while and said, we still can't. But we can do this. We don't know what Lin Liangzi knows, so it's not good to ask him. In that case, we'll ask him to tell Li Yunxin. I have a plan. We can ask Li Yunxin to capture Lin Liangzi, and ask him for information. Then we can capture Li Yunxin. Isn't that killing two birds with one stone? Kuan Wuzi was silent for a while, as if he was making a decision. Then he said, okay. Li Shan was happy. Then let's do this. Li Yunxin wants to pretend to join Daotong, so we'll cater to his interests. But he wants us to get rid of those big demons for him. But we don't follow his way. We can't let him take advantage of us. When he comes to Daotong, he won't know that we're on the same side. At that time, he will be in the light, and we will be in the dark. We can set a few big magic circles, and he will be trapped. He can't escape. Then let's capture him, interrogate him carefully, and then make a plan, okay? Kuan Wuzi was silent for a while and said, okay. Li Shan didn't speak. After a few seconds, he asked in the darkness, judging from your voice, you still have something on your mind. Tell me, senior brother. Let me see if I can help. Kuan Wuzi was silent for a longer time this time. Then he said, that Ling Kongzi is still in Dongting, right? The insects in the grass near them chirped for a while before they heard Li Shan's voice. Oh, about that. A small beast passed through the grass. The insects were scared and stopped chirping. After a while, they tried to make a low hiss again. And then it became louder. Li Shan said again, okay, I'll help you keep an eye on her, to see if I can protect her. Kuan Wuzi gritted his teeth. Thank you. Don't mention it. It's getting late. Li Shan walked a few steps away from Kuan Wuzi. Senior apprentice, please go back. His tone gradually calmed down. Don't make people in Daotong suspicious. We still have important things to do. Chapter 252. What happens in the next 2 days is within Li Shan's expectation. Just like the demons in Dongting don't care about the Ao King, the demons around Dongting also don't care about the wishes of Wei River Dragon King. Many demons have occupied Weishui River for hundreds of years. During these hundreds of years, the 9th young master has never caused any trouble. Now he suddenly wants to make trouble as if he is a leader. Who cares about him? Demons are more concerned about their own affairs. Compared with *T like the war between monsters and Taoists, the world's catastrophe, and destroying them one by one, they are more concerned about whether their territory will be targeted, whether their position is secure, where they can catch people to eat, and whether there are disciples of Daotong walking around nearby. They hope they can get out of here as soon as possible, so that they can continue to have fun. The section of Weishui River near the city of Wei used to be under the actual control of the ninth young master. Beyond that is the territory of demons. The area that the fiendish demons controlled was far larger than anyone could imagine. Hunters who often enter the mountain know that a pack of wolves hunting ground may be as vast as dozens of miles, let alone demons. After all, this world is vast and sparsely populated. Most of the wilderness is actually under the name of a monster king. After all, demon kings only had jurisdiction over a certain territory in name. They would never be so arrogant as to run to a large human city in their territory and declare their ownership. But it also means one thing. Very few demons know that Wei River Dragon King is not the former Wei River Dragon King. That day, Li Yunxin made a magical scene over the city of Wei, which can be seen from dozens of miles away. But the problem is, the monster king closest to the city of Wei is also hundreds of miles away. This monster is a big demon with the highest personal ability, except for the Lord Dongting in the city of Wei River. No one knows what his real body is, but he calls himself Evil King. He has a rare magic weapon called True Eye in his hand. The old monster Evil King has been cultivating for more than 2,000 years. Before the divine dragon gave Weishui River to his ninth son Chongwen, he had already occupied this place. This was the end of the wilderness forest outside the city of Wei, where the terrain suddenly rose. There were many mountain peaks in the surroundings, but there was very little vegetation. Most of them were rough desert and bluish stone mountains. Up to this point, the Wei River had made 6 or 7 turns. The river narrowed, and the current flowed even more rapidly. This kind of place was inconvenient to transport by water, and the mountain roads were difficult to traverse, so there were very few people. There was only one small city within a radius of a few hundred miles, and it was called Definition City. This city was the westernmost border city of the Daqing State's Wei River Prefecture. Because of this unique condition, even the people of Daotong were not willing to pay attention to this monster. Firstly, his cultivation was profound, and he was in the mysterious state of Shi. Secondly, there weren't many people here. As long as this demon didn't eat all the people in the city, who would be willing to go to war for him? In truth, when Kuan Wuzi and the others came to Weiqing City, they only moved around the periphery of the city, because they were afraid of the Evil King. When Wei River was assigned to the ninth young master in name, Evil King didn't care at all. He was a great monster in the real state. If there was anything that he was afraid of, it would be Shinryu. Other people, such as Dragon Sun, came to his territory to fight with him. What could they gain? Fortunately, the ninth young master was tactful. He didn't dare to come and look for trouble, and only stayed near the city of Wei. Evil King knew that it was because there was a more terrifying monster, Lord Dongting, in Dongting. Even the place where Dragon Sun was staying was surrounded by strong enemies, not to mention something that was hundreds of miles away. Therefore, when he got the message from the Dongting water tribe sent by Li Yunxin, Evil King laughed and tore the messenger into pieces. Then he said to the demon general beside him, "What a good Wei River Dragon King, he. For the sake of Shinryu, we showed him some respect and didn't make things difficult for him. But he wanted to command the heroes. Why are you saying such senseless things?" He frowned and looked at a piece of fish skin in his hand as he said. That fish skin was carried by every little monster who came to deliver the message. There was a letter written by Li Yunxin on it. He did this to prevent the little monster from speaking clearly, so that the monster kings could read it. But in this era, there were not many people who could read, let alone the monster kings. Evil King had lived for a long time, so he wanted to learn some human knowledge for a while. That was why he could read it and read it clearly. If the lips die, the teeth will be cold, and fortune and misfortune depend on each other. Well, Evil King frowned and looked at Li Yunxin's words. He sighed after a glance, as if every word stabbed his heart and made him unhappy. It's all bullsh*t. We have been operating in Stone Forest Mountain and Juka Gorge for 2,000 years. Who dared to come here? Even the Taoist priests of Daotong and the swordsmen of Kenzo had to land and leave when they flew over my territory. No one dared to disrespect me. I think it was Long Jiao who provoked the people of Daotong. Now he wants to get us involved in this mess. There were monster generals around the evil king, and there were also monster generals around Lishan in the past. But evil king was a big monster who had just reached the Xian realm. How could those stupid monster generals around Lishan compare to him? At this moment, the person talking to him was a woman who called herself Qi Duanjin. She had been cultivating for more than 600 years, and now she was at the peak of the transcendent realm. Her real body was a colorful poisonous snake. Qi Duanjin thought for a while and read the fish skin letter in Evil King's hand again. She frowned and said, "Your Majesty, Long Jiao said that now the Lord Dongting is not here, and Daotong is going to plot the dragon soul. This might not be fake. Your Majesty, how many years has the old monster of Dongting guarded that place? But who has seen him leave Dongting? Why did he go there now?" Although Evil King had lived for a long time, he still paid attention to Qi Duanjin's words. He frowned and pondered for a while. He glanced at her and said, "What you said makes sense. In your opinion, what should we do?" Qi Duanjin stood up and said seriously, "In my opinion, we can't take this matter lightly. Even if you don't care, we can't guarantee that other monster kings won't make mistakes. Why don't you gather them together and listen to what they have to say before you make a decision?" When Qi Duanjin was talking, Evil King stared at her. When she finished, Evil King clapped his hands and said, "Good. You've thought it through. Send an order for my 7 sons to come here, and we'll have a good discussion." Evil King's 7 sons were actually his adopted sons. They used to be the 7 big monsters who lived near Stone Forest Mountain and Juka Gorge where Evil King lived. But at that time, there were not 7 monster kings, but 7 monster generals who served a big monster together. Later, Evil King spent a lot of effort to kill that big monster. Then he assigned his 7 sons to guard the territory near his own territory. As such, firstly, it could serve as a buffer between him and the other great fiendish demons. Secondly, the heretic king admired the demeanor of the true dragon conferring his 9 sons. He felt that it was the style of a divine dragon. Thirdly, Evil King could be regarded as an unusual kind of monster, and he was unusual in his love of talent. Most ordinary monsters were violent by nature. When they saw a powerful monster around them, they would kill them to prevent them from threatening their position in the future. But Evil King was different. He had subdued a lot of monsters over the years, but he rarely killed them. If they said they would surrender to him, he would spare their lives and let them be a monster general under him. In this way, he had a lot of high-level monsters under him, and they also had to sacrifice their lives. But he was also someone who liked to listen to advice and follow good advice. Just like what Qi Duanjin said today, as long as he felt that it was reasonable, he would not be obstinate. Snake spirit Qi Duanjin also knew his Evil King's background. He immediately accepted the order and went to summon the 7 sons. This Evil King's nest was on the tallest mountain in Stone Forest Mountain. Rather than calling it a mountain, it was more like a stone pillar. The stone pillar that seemed to pierce through the sky was abnormally steep, and there was almost no vegetation on its surface. Not to mention humans, even monkeys that were good at climbing couldn't reach the peak. Birds could fly over it, but if someone really flew over, they would definitely be captured and eaten by the monsters on the mountain. This stone mountain was a few hundred meters tall and a few dozen meters wide. The mountain was almost hollowed out. From afar, it looked like a beehive. There were many holes one after another, and the whole mountain was hollowed out. The Diablo and the 200 demons under him lived in this lair. This nest also had a name. It was called Pitfall Mountain. Qi Duanjin naturally went to summon the 7 sons. But she also selected a lot of little fiendish demons and asked them to bring the token of Pitfall Mountain to the other little monster kings. Li Yunxin sent 200 to 300 demons to deliver the letter, but more than half of them had already run away. The remaining 100 or so people couldn't walk safely. Some of the demons were bloodthirsty. When they saw their own kind, they didn't care about their identity or background. They would kill and eat them without any explanation. As a result, there were only a few dozen people who could really receive the letter. But all of this was already expected. Those who could respond to this information were all reasonable. Those who couldn't receive the letter were mostly little fiendish demons with low cultivation, and they were of no use. Now that Qi Duanjin also sent people to deliver the letter, it was to gather all the little monster kings who received Li Yunxin's letter, to prevent anyone from running away to meet up with Long Jiao. Evil King's reputation here was far above Long Jiao's, who dared to disobey him. So Qi Duanjin did something for Li Yunxin. Those little monster kings dared to ignore Long Jiao, but they didn't dare to ignore Evil King. Regardless of whether they knew or not, they all came. 3 days later, the Pitfall Mountain gathered all the little monster kings within thousands of miles, from the city of Wei to the Juka Gorge, a total of 150 people. If you looked at it on the map, that section of Wei River looked like a thin line, or the stem of a leaf. And the territories ruled by these little monster kings overlapped and formed a huge leaf. It included 5 to 6 prefectures near the city of Wei, which was almost a quarter of the area of the Daqing state. If the demons also had a history book, this was indeed a big event worthy of being recorded in the history books. Chapter 253. In the past few days, Dongting is not peaceful either. However, the turbulence near the Pitting Mountain is not peaceful. In the Dongting, there are undercurrents. At first, the Taoists near the city of Wei are busy, but they are not busy dealing with the inhibition of Dongting. Instead, they are busy setting up checkpoints. The checkpoints set up by the Taoists are different from the checkpoints set up by the government in the secular world. The government checkpoints are set up on the road. Only those on the ground are allowed to pass. However, the Taoist checkpoints are set up in the sky. All the passage between the sky and the ground is prohibited. Just like the Taoists in the city of Wei, who drew the sun in the sky, many cultivators who have reached the transcendent state and can fly in the sky and write all kinds of spells. These spells have the distinctive characteristics of each cultivator, but they can also cooperate with each other. Thus, a huge three-dimensional restriction that covered the entire space appeared. Although this inhibition is big, it is far from being comparable to the inhibition of Dongting. Even a secular person will only feel a little tightness in the chest when affected by the power of this inhibition. Because this inhibition is not used to restrict people's movement. It is to find a wandering soul. Lin Lizhu and the former Faiyunzi killed Kunwazi. However, the cultivators in the advanced mysterious state have some terrible means. Even the Tiangang formation of life and death killed the unprepared Kunwazi in an instant with the power of 100,000 ghosts. It seems that there is still a trace of his soul left in him. Of course, he can't let this remnant soul go. This inhibition can't restrain people, but it can be used to find a remnant soul. Kunwazi wants to get rid of the trouble as soon as possible to avoid any changes in the future. However, this inhibition is made. He has been looking for it for several days without any result. Kunwazi knows that the former Grand Master's realm is unfathomable. However, he was not an ordinary person when he was Faiyunzi. The difference between a Taoist in the true state and a Taoist in the mysterious state can be big or small. Taoists at the peak of the transcendent state can enter the true state and mysterious state. They can practice more powerful spells. This means that the difference between the true state and mysterious state is mostly about the strength of Wakan and the thorough understanding of Taoism. If Li Yunxin explains this, he will say that the true state is a primary school student who doesn't study hard and plays games every day. On the other hand, Mysterious Realm was a primary school student who was attentively listening to the teacher, earnestly revising the lesson, and after the lesson, he still had to attend the cram school. But in the end, they were just primary school students. Therefore, Kuan Wuzi roughly knew what kind of method the former leader of the Langya cave abode would use to preserve a trace of his soul. He also knew how fast he could travel in a day and how he could hide. If he didn't know these things, no one would dare to kill a profound realm cultivator of Daotong under the eyes of other cultivators. But he had seen a ghost. He just couldn't find Kuan Wuzi's remnant soul. Therefore, the newly promoted sect master of Lengya Cave Heaven was temporarily attracted by this matter. At this time, Li Shan was busy paying attention to Li Yunxin's whereabouts. Since he had already decided to do something, he had to control all the details. Unfortunately, the original Li Shan wasn't a trusted follower of Li Yunxin. Therefore, the only thing he could do was to send many water-kind spirit creatures to hide around Mount June nominally. They were ready to be summoned at any time. But in fact, they were paying attention to Li Yunxin's whereabouts. They also knew that Li Yunxin had a way to get out of the inhibition of Dongting. But there were also Taoists guarding there. These two brothers were actually using the tactic of numbers. But the problem was, they were guarding the wrong place. Li Yunxin shook his head. He stood in the corridor of the middle hall of Mount June. In front of him was the cliff of hundreds of meters, and the scenery of Dongting. The mountain wind blew through the corridor. The small copper bells hanging on the eaves rang one after another. It was a bit pleasant. I took those lake monsters out of the inhibition that day. When I arrived in the forest, I didn't unlock their 5 senses. I took them out for more than 10 miles before I released them. Otherwise, it wouldn't take so much time to transport 200 or 300 people out. Li Yunxin stood in the corridor with his hands behind his back and looked at the scenery in the distance. He shook his head again. At that time, I thought there might be a problem. Sure enough, there was a problem. Now the people of Daotong are guarding the place where I woke up those demons. They thought I would come out from there. Do you think there is something wrong with some of us? This was said to Lu Laodao. Lu Laodao was also in the corridor. He moved a rattan chair on the back of a jade screen and leaned against it. However, this rattan chair only looked like it was made of rattan. In fact, it was not made of gold or wood. It was obviously a treasure. Laodao liked this chair. He took it with him everywhere these days. Hung Myungzi sometimes laughed at him. He just smiled and said, "It's good to use the things of immortals." He didn't argue with the little girl, although this little girl might be older than his great-grandmother. At this time, Lu Laodao was enjoying the mountain breeze. His thoughts were a little more active. He knew that sometimes when Brother Xian asked him something, it didn't mean that he didn't have a clue. It was just that Brother Xian liked to talk about things with people he could trust. As he talked, he would clear his thoughts. As he talked, he would have an epiphany. So he squinted his eyes, thought for a moment and said, "Brother Xian, didn't you say it before? Look at our Mrs. Sanhua. She is a bit suspicious. That you family's Yu Meng is also a bit suspicious. Our family's Sanhua is not often seen these days. But I know she went to the lake to play. You see, she hides her worries, but she also likes to play. If I had to say, she has the temperament of a child. If I had to suspect something, I wouldn't suspect her. But that you family's young master, you also sent him out. If I had to say, he is also a suspect. And that Li Shan that you subdued. So I don't have a clue." Li Yunxin turned around. There was something in his hand. It was the jade slip of enlightenment. He tossed the jade slip in his hand and laughed at himself. "Actually, I'm afraid of hardship. And I don't like to study. When I was young, I didn't know anything in the mountain village. My parents taught me well, so I learned quickly. Until now, if I didn't get a demon body, I don't know when I could cultivate to the real state. They are all looking for this thing. If they really see it, they will be disappointed. Old Lu, why don't you guess what's in here so far?" Lu Laodao knew that the jade slip in his hand was the jade slip of enlightenment. He also knew from him that the jade slip of enlightenment was a painting treasure and a relic of the saint of painting. After all, he was a painter, and now he had become a Taoist painter. So he didn't dare to show any disrespect to the ancestors' things. When Li Yunxin tossed the treasure in his hand, he couldn't help sitting up straight and staring at it. He was afraid that Brother Xian would accidentally break it. He thought for a while and swallowed. "I don't dare to guess. I don't dare to guess." Li Yunxin sighed. "So far, the parts one can see are all about cultivation. But it's better to give me a few secret manuals for me to cultivate." Guess what's the method of transforming the soul into the real body, in the truth-telling state? There's only one sentence. You really think it's real? Damn it, who are you fooling? Lu Laodao's face changed. He thought, Brother Xian, how dare you scold the ancestor? But it was not good to say this to Li Yunxin. He could only apologize for Li Yunxin in his heart, afraid that lightning would strike him. Li Yunxin complained, but he still jumped on the railing along the corridor, sat with one leg up, and opened the jade slip of enlightenment. After opening it, he began to mumble and read. In Lu Laodao's eyes, he was talking nonsense. Sometimes, it would smile strangely, as if it understood what was going on. Sometimes he didn't say anything, but just frowned. After frowning for a while, he began to scold people to himself, which made Lao Dao panic. When Li Yunxin was reading, Lu Laodao kept a lookout for him, not letting others see the jade slip. After a whole afternoon, Li Yunxin stood up and sighed. Who are you fooling? Lao Dao heard him mention the method of transforming the soul into the real body, and knew that he was practicing it. Hearing his unhappy tone, he knew that the progress was not good, so he tried to comfort him. The method that Brother Xian talked about is not the method that Yunzi used in the city of Wei, right? In the city of Wei, when Li Yunxin pretended to be Dragon Sun Hatred, Yunzi used his doppelganger to come out of the treasure mirror of arcane light, and talked with Li Yunxin in detail. And Qing Liangzi, who was killed by Li Yunxin, also mentioned that he had fought with the doppelganger of Li Yunxin's parents thousands of miles away. Li Yunxin nodded. Yes, it's that thing. People in the real state can do it. They are already Zhenren. Their souls can be divided into another self temporarily, which is also the real self. But it is difficult to practice, and not everyone can do it. I wanted to do this just now, thinking that I could help, but in the end, Li Yunxin looked at the translucent jade script in disgust. What nonsense are you talking about? Lao Dao was afraid that he would start to scold the Grandmaster again, so he hurriedly comforted him. Don't worry. Since it is a difficult method to practice, it is always better to take it slow. Brother Xian has a high comprehension and talent. If 1 day is not enough, 2 days is enough. If 2 days is not enough, 3 days is enough. You will eventually succeed. Hearing this, Li Yunxin blinked his eyes and looked at him strangely. Huh? I have already practiced it. Lao Dao didn't react for a moment and was stunned. In just a moment, he heard another Li Yunxin said behind him. When did you see me practice a method for more than 2 days? Lao Dao turned his head. It was really another Li Yunxin. Lu Laodao was stunned for a while and said in disbelief. Didn't Brother Xian say this method is difficult to practice? Li Yunxin laughed and spread out his hands. Otherwise, how can I be called a genius? Lao Dao sighed in his heart, thinking that if you are like this, it is easy to lose friends. After another day, Bai Yunxin came to visit. These days, she wandered in the lake with her little maid. Those who knew the inside story all guessed that she was going to take the dragon's soul. But they only thought that she hadn't found where the dragon's soul was. Only Li Yunxin knew that it was because of his previous promise to ask her to cooperate with him to take the dragon's soul away later, so that he would have time to arrange something. And he would settle the marriage that her adoptive father Rock King planned for her as a reward. Apparently, Li Yunxin had gained some confidence in Bai Yunxin after he had caused a few big events near the city of Wei. She actually did as he said. Li Shan watched Bai Yunxin enter the middle hall of Ziwei Palace in Mount Jun. Then he talked with Li Yunxin for a whole night. On the second day, Li Yunxin and Bai Yunxin still didn't show up. Li Shan was a little anxious. He was afraid that Li Yunxin had gone somewhere else out of the inhibition of Dongting. But when he was anxious, he saw Red Lady coming out of the front hall of Ziwei Palace. Red Lady built a small wooden pavilion beside the white beach of Mount Jun to commemorate the time when she and Li Yunxin first met. Later, this wooden pavilion became her place when she was bored. She was the princess of Dongting, and now she should be the ruler of Dongting. However, everyone in Dongting knew that the Lord Dongting didn't care about his daughter very much. He even treated her as an object. And now, a great demon like Li Yunxin had entered Crepe Myrtle Palace, This red lady had truly become a figure that no one could see. But today, Li Shan only paid attention to Red Lady. He looked from a distance and saw that this beauty came with wine. When she came to the wooden pavilion, she stared into the distance for a while, and then began to drink wine. Then he knew that she was sad again. He also heard some other words that Red Lady said to herself while drinking. Although it was just a few words, Li Shan could infer with his intelligence. It was because of Bai Yunxin. At this moment, Bai Yunxin was still in Ziwei Palace, and she was talking happily with Li Yunxin. How could Red Lady tolerate this kind of thing? She couldn't lose her temper in front of the two big demons, so she had to escape and drown her sorrows in wine. Li Shan was a little relieved. Another morning passed like this. Red Lady was drunk and slept in the pavilion. However, Li Yunxin and Bai Yunxin hadn't come out yet. Li Shan was anxious and wanted to find an excuse to break in and report something. But as luck would have it, a good thing actually came knocking on his door. Mrs. Sanhua, who was with Li Yunxin, came back from somewhere. Seeing Li Shan poking his head out from afar in the water, he felt like playing around. She was half a dragon's. Although she was in the emptiness realm, her physical strength was not weaker than Li Shan's. Therefore, she jumped into the water and picked Li Shan up. She said that he looked funny, and she was very bored in the hall. So she asked him to play with her in the hall. This was exactly what Li Shan wanted. He pretended to say, "This Sanhua is the fairy of the king, so I don't dare to be rash," and followed her into the hall. So, he was finally relieved. When he entered the hall, he saw that Li Yunxin was still sitting opposite Bai Yunxin. However, he didn't kneel according to the ancient custom. Instead, he sat on a comfortable rattan chair. Beside him were Lu Laodao and Bai Yunxin's servant girls. The four of them sat around a table and seemed to be playing something. Li Shan watched from afar. Although he did not want to know what they were playing about, he heard Li Yunxin shouting excitedly from time to time, "I knew you were a loyal minister," or crying out in frustration, "Take me away, don't leave me to the traitor," or sighing and saying, "Why am I a traitor again?" As he listened, he became anxious again. Could it be that the four of them sensed that something was wrong and were investigating one by one? Unfortunately, before he could find out, Sanhua dragged him to a corner of the hall and forced him to play with her. The three flowers play wasn't fun at all. They were fighting like cats playing with each other. Li Shan had to play with her carefully, afraid that she would drive him out. He also had to restrain his strength of the peak of the transcendent realm, so that he wouldn't hurt her. He didn't have the mood to listen to what Li Yunxin and the others were talking about. As a result, they ended up fooling around for an entire day. It was the first day of the gathering of the demons in the Pitfall Mountain of the Evil King. Chapter 254. The Evil King occupied Stone Forest Mountain and Jika Gorge, but in reality, his power covered an area of 1,000 li. He was one of the few powerful demons in the Qing Kingdom. Thus the rules here were very strict. The various demon kings who came to attend the meeting could not walk into Pitfall Mountain openly. They had to be interrogated before they could be let in. This interrogation was not about anything else, but to verify his true identity, to see if he was a monster king or someone else in disguise. This was not the evil king's idea, but Qi Jin's. She was afraid that Daodong's people would sneak in and cause trouble. The thing she used to interrogate was the evil king's eye of truth. Every fiendish demon in the Pitfall Mountain had seen the appearance of the true eye before. Although the evil king could not let every little demon play with it, he did not view it as a forbidden item. This was because the eye of truth was very big and could only be used to distinguish the real from the fake. However, very few people knew the reason why such an item became the evil king's famous, enchanted treasure. That day, Qi Jin was guarding the only entrance of Pitfall Mountain. She sat on a large tiger skin chair. Dozens of demon soldiers surrounded her, checking the identity of the demon kings one by one. The demon kings came one by one, and Qi Jin waited quietly. That day, the sky near Stone Forest Mountain was clear. Although it was a barren land with no trees in sight, the wide and rough Gobi Desert gave off a sense of heroism. But both Qi Jin and the little demons around her were tired of seeing this scene. So she sat on the large chair and basked in the sun. The little demons also lay or leaned against her, lazily basking in the sun around her. To people who did not know what was going on, it looked like a young woman with a group of children enjoying the happiness of a family. When the Demon King came from afar, the little demons jumped up in high spirits. If it was a big demon, it was fine. But if it was a small demon king, they would rush up and search him. Although it was a body search, it was actually a search. They took everything they wanted, and then called Chidwan-jin for questioning. The small demon kings were afraid of the evil king's power, and did not dare to argue with the demon soldiers. They all swallowed their anger. When his body was searched clean, he walked in front of Chidwan-jin. At this time he began to use the true eye to verify his identity. The true eye was very large, at least 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. When it stood up, it was taller than a person. It looked like a huge iron plate, but it was indeed an iron plate. The evil king used 2 pieces of iron plates as a shell to wrap up the treasure inside. But there was a small hole in the iron plate, about the size of a thumb, revealing a black dot. Anyone who had a rough understanding of literature would think that the black dot was actually an ink dot. But the eye in the name of the true eye magic treasure referred to this thing. The Demon King came in front of Chidwan-jin and told him to look at the iron plate, the black dot on the iron plate. Then he asked him what he saw. If the answer was correct, it would be the real body, and if the answer was wrong, it would be a fake. However, a total of 63 Demon Kings had come today, and no one had impersonated them yet. And it was difficult for those Demon Kings to realize that this was the famous magic treasure of the evil king, who would casually take out a magic treasure and stick it on the ground. It was not until noon that he saw another person walking over from afar. This person looked like a scholar, and he was dressed in white. He walked at the end of the horizon where the heat waves were rising, and his figure became distorted because of the distorted air. Great demon kings brought their demon generals when they came to the meeting, and only the unranked little demon kings came alone. And looking at his attire, it was obvious that he was used to interacting with people. Great demon kings who lived in the mountains and wilderness would not dress like this. They were more wild and rough. This wild and rough included, but was not limited to, using human bones as decoration, being naked, and wearing all kinds of oil paint. But for him to dress like this, it meant that he was close to a human town. If he was close and was not killed by a Taoist priest or a swordsman, he was either so strong that the other party could do nothing about it, or he was dutifully a good person. The demon soldiers generally believed that this person belonged to the latter. It also meant that he would have many good things on him. Human things were relatively rare. There was only one defined city near the Stone Forest Mountain. The people and things in that city were enjoyed by the evil king, and they did not have such luck. So they jumped up and rubbed their palms, preparing to plunder some benefits from him. When this person walked closer unhurriedly, 7th Duan-jin raised his eyelids and looked at him. But after looking at him, he was slightly stunned. Then he sat up straight and stared at him carefully. The demon soldiers also saw him clearly, and they were all stunned. Because this demon king was really strange, he looked too much like a human. The more powerful a demon was, the more they looked like a human when they turned into a human. This was not very strange. But what was even stranger about this person was that not only did he look like a human, he was also very beautiful. Even in a human town, he could be called a real handsome man, right? Among the fiendish demons, this was indeed extremely rare. He stepped on the gravel and walked closer, then cupped his hands and smiled at the group of demons. I am here to attend the meeting. Hearing him speak, he actually looked more like a human. The group of demons was stunned by him. After a while, someone asked him angrily, "Which mountain's demon king are you from? How come I have never seen you before?" This beautiful man did not pay attention to the person who spoke, but looked at 7th Duan-jin and smiled. "I am from the Water Tribe. I used to live near Dongting, and I also have some soldiers under my command. A few days ago, I went out because of some matters, but I didn't expect that Dongting would be sealed, and I couldn't return home. I heard that the evil king was holding a meeting here, so I came to see if I could get a job. Oh, when I was in Dongting, They all called me the romantic jade-faced little silver dragon. Hearing his name, the demon soldiers looked at each other, not knowing what it meant. But 7th Duanjin laughed. Your name is quite appropriate. You really look like a romantic talent. After thinking for a while, he said, although you are not the local demon king, your cultivation level is not low. I like you, so I'll let you in. But after entering Pitfall Mountain, you can't walk around randomly, in case you get caught. This romantic jade-faced little silver dragon quickly clasped his hands in thanks. Thank you, fairy sister. My cultivation level is not high, but I have reached the stage of turning nothingness into reality. I will definitely not disappoint, sister. The demon soldiers originally wanted to charge forward, but seeing the current situation, it was not good to do so. They all knew that 7th Duanjin liked handsome men. But which handsome man they had seen before could compare to this little silver dragon? 7th Duanjin smiled as he received his compliment, then pointed at the large metal plate beside him. Come look at this. This little silver dragon took a few steps closer to take a look, asking curiously, what is this? 7th Duanjin still smiled at him. Come look at the hole on the metal plate. What do you see inside? The person who came found the hole, and his expression became serious. He carefully looked at it for a while. After 5 or 6 breaths of time, he turned his head to look at 7th Duanjin. I see an eye. 7th Duanjin stared at him, asking, what kind of eye? This romantic jade-faced little silver dragon thought for a while, then said, from a rough look, it looks like a cat's eye. But looking at the ferocious expression in its eyes, it doesn't seem like a cat's. If I had to say, it's either a leopard's eye or a tiger's eye. 7th Duanjin smiled again. Good. You're knowledgeable. You can go in. This little silver dragon bowed to 7th Duanjin again, then lifted his feet and walked through the door. The door of the Pitfall Mountain was a stone door, opening at the foot of the mountain. Originally it should have been a cave, but the shape was not neat. Right now there were many human or animal skeletons and skeletons decorating the side of the cave, acting as a facade. After entering the door, he first walked through a deep and serene passage. Although it was wide, it was cold and damp, even dripping with water. This was a completely different scene from the dry and hot weather outside. After walking for about 15 minutes, he finally saw the light at the end and heard the sounds in the cave. It was as he had expected. It was a mess, and he could not hear anything clearly. Only demons with a higher cultivation could speak the human language. Many demons with low cultivation mostly communicated with each other through body language and primitive howls. But although some demon kings had high cultivation, they were together with a group of small demons. Who could they speak the human language to? Over time, they did not like to speak the human language. At this moment, he heard such a clamor, and also a thick smell of blood. Li Yunxin. He frowned slightly. He had originally thought that the evil king was a great demon like the Lord Dongting, and should be more like a human. Who would have guessed that this would be the scene here? That smell of blood. Although he could not smell whether it was from a human or an animal. But with a group of demons gathered here, the answer was clear. He did not like this kind of banquet. So he gave a low sigh, and took 2 more steps forward. Suddenly, the view in front of him became clear. What he saw was a hollowed-out mountain. Looking down, 10 or so meters below the ground, there was a terrifyingly wide square. Looking up, there was endless darkness. It turned out that the entire mountain was connected in the middle, not like what he had guessed, made up of stone rooms. He was standing on a cliff, right now. On both sides were narrow passageways carved out from the stone walls. These passageways were densely packed, crisscrossing as far as his eyes could see. Some of them led underground, some spiraled along the stone walls to higher places. A few doors opened on the stone walls, probably rooms. The hundreds of demons of Pitfall Mountain probably lived in these rooms. The underground square was lit with countless torches. At first glance, it looked bright and glorious. But this golden color was embellished with red. The color was very pleasing to the eye. But this kind of pleasure belonged to the demons, not to any human. Because there was a large pool in the middle of the square. And the pool was red. There was no red wine in this world. so it was obvious what the red liquid was. On the southern side of the square, there was a row of large wooden cages, all of which were filled with people. Li Yunxin did a rough count. There were at least 100 of them. Dozens of monster kings came. Some of them brought their followers. In addition to the busy lesser demons of Pitfall Mountain, the 200 to 300 demons in the square didn't seem crowded, but it wasn't deserted either. Meanwhile, the little demons of Pitfall Mountain were busy with their work. Some were taking people out of the cages. Some were stripping them of their clothes. If they were old, weak, or sick, they were stripped of their clothes. Then their heads were cut off, and their blood was drained. After the blood was drained, the demons dismembered them, skinned them, and sent them to the western side of the square to be steamed, fried, boiled, or roasted. If they were strong and fat, they were stripped of their clothes as well. But their mouths were gagged, their hands and feet were tied up like pigs and dogs, and sent to the seats of the monster kings. Then they used a stake to make a hole in their necks, hung them up like a wine bag, and drank their blood. Dozens of lesser demons were cooking and frying humans. Their screams were endless. But the demons loved the screams, so they didn't have to sing and dance. The other demons, who were serving food like a river, or the demon soldiers and generals brought by the demons, lost control when their masters were eating and drinking, so they ran around the square, mostly towards the pile of corpses. There was a huge pile in the southwest of the hall, filled with human bones, internal organs, and intestines. When Li Yunxin saw it, it was already as tall as a small mountain. He didn't even know how many people had been killed. Blood and all kinds of secretions mixed together and flowed everywhere, giving off a strong stench. But the lesser demons loved the smell, so they gathered in groups of 3 to 5. The braver ones would steal the bowls of intestines and eat them until their mouths were full of blood. The cowardly ones would only pick up bones with flesh and blood to satisfy their cravings, but they still chewed them crisply. The lesser demons of Pitfall Mountain would chase them away, but they were not reasonable, and if they fought often, 1 or 2 of them would die. The monster kings didn't care, and instead laughed. Li Yunxin stood at the entrance of the cave and stared at the scene for a long time. This was the first time he saw such a scene. He had seen demons eat humans before. He saw the 9th young master eat humans, and the Lord Dongting eat humans. But he had never seen so many demons eat so many humans. He wasn't sure what kind of emotion he was feeling: shock, disgust, or fear. He looked down for a moment and noticed 5 more people. Yes, 5 people. These 5 people were not locked in cages, nor were they tied up, nor were they corpses. They were 5 neatly dressed people, sitting around a stone table. The stone table was right below the entrance. If Li Yunxin hadn't taken a few steps forward and looked down, he wouldn't have noticed them. They were dimly lit, and there was a torch inserted into the rock wall from afar. There were many wine jars here, some taller than a person. These wine jars were lined up, and there were nearly 100 of them, forming a wall. Behind the wall were some bags, perhaps containing rice, flour, oil, or other miscellaneous items. And these 5 people were sitting at a table in this pile of miscellaneous items, far away from the demons outside. They were drinking and eating meat. Li Yunxin narrowed his eyes and stared for a while, expressionless. He saw a small demon carrying a steaming hot pot stumble into the room. It placed the pot at the feet of the 5 people, said something to them, and left again. Li Yunxin knew that the soup in the pot was human flesh and bones. And it seemed that the 5 people knew it too, but they didn't mind it at all. They scooped it out happily, grabbed it with their hands, and ate until their mouths were full of oil. After a few mouthfuls, they felt a little tired, so they picked up the bowl and drank some wine before eating again. One of the 5 people was wearing clothes that Li Yunxin had seen 2 people wear before. One was Constable Xing of Qinghe County, and the other was Inspector Yin of Liuhe Prefecture of City of Wei. They wore a square hat with a peacock feather on it. These 5 people were 1 constable and 4 constables. Chapter 255. They're humans, Li Yunxin muttered to himself. He wanted to find a reason to absolve these 5 people, but the thought disappeared in a flash. He had seen too much of the evil in human nature. Most of the time, No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't imagine what kind of shocking evil existed in this world. He stared at the 5 people for a while and sighed. At this time, he heard a voice that he hadn't heard for a long time. This voice was sharp, and there was a hint of mockery in it. Did you sigh because you feel better about the demons? The voice came from the front left. It should be empty space. There was no place to stand. But Li Yunxin didn't rush to look up. He stood there in silence for a while, then looked up. Then he saw Bai Yanjun. This Yama king, who had not been seen for a long time, floated in midair. One of his black eyeballs was staring at Li Yunxin, while the other eye was looking at the scene in the hall below. He looked very strange. These 5 people are the officials of a city 30 miles east of the Pitfall Mountain. They've been colluding with the Diablo for a long time. Usually, they send prisoners to the demons regularly, and only say that they died of illness in the prison. The demons also gave them benefits and promised them gold and silver. Now that the Diablo is holding a banquet, he actually ate so many people. These 5 people are quite capable to be able to find them. Bai Yanjun spoke frankly to Li Yunxin, as if he was telling a story, but Li Yunxin knew that he was a king of hell. In the legends of mortals, the black and white kings of hell were the righteous deities responsible for good and evil retribution, and the cycle of reincarnation. When good people died, Bai Yanjun would lead them away and reincarnate into a good family. When evil people died, the Black King of Hell would lead them away and send them to hell. But Li Yunxin already knew that it was all bullsh*t. There was no such thing as good and evil retribution in this world. This Bai Yanjun was still chattering. I see that you're having a good time as a demon now. Seeing this scene again, don't you feel even more disappointed? At catching your own kind and sending them to demons to eat. Demons can't do such a thing. At this point he didn't say anything more. The black eyeball that was looking at the hall suddenly turned back and stared at Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin smiled. Oh, none of them were good people. There were villains among men, and demons were no better. Cannibalism was not a common sight, but demons and monsters were quite common. It's just that my sigh was a sigh. I always thought that I was cool enough, but when I saw this scene and these 5 people, I was still shocked. I used to think that priests and swordsmen were heartless because they made themselves inhuman. Even now, if they aren't shocked by the scene before them, then they are indeed smarter than me. Let's not talk about me. Yamajun has been ignoring me for a long time. Why did he suddenly jump out and look for me? If it wasn't urgent, they could talk about it later. I'm about to make a big scoop. The smile on Bai Yanjun's face gradually faded. His black eyes occupied his entire eye sockets, looking like 2 black holes. He stared at Li Yunxin for a long time before he let out a cold laugh. What's the matter? Hey, you little fellow, you have a lot of skill and a lot of guts. What kind of person's soul do you dare to take it? Li Yunxin was stunned for a moment before he said, Oh, you mean him? At this point, 2 strange-looking demons walked over from the entrance with their arms around each other's shoulders. Li Yunxin kept his mouth shut and stood leaning against the wall. The 2 demons had already smelled blood and were in no mood to pay attention to him. They didn't even bother to look at him and hurriedly jumped down from the cliff. Li Yunxin then said, I'm a civil servant of the underworld after all. There are no benefits and no salary. This time, I'm using my power for personal gain. Why don't you let him go? I'll give him to you after the matter is settled, okay? Bai Yanjun didn't fall for his trick. He glared at him. 2 black eyes occupied half of his face in an instant, making him look like a monster. I love your talent. That's why I put up with you again and again. Don't push your luck. Give him to me now immediately. Li Yunxin said helplessly. But I still have a use for him. I'm also a judge of the Yang realm, and he can't stir up any waves right now. Lend him to me for a few days. What's the problem? Hey, what do you know? Bai Yanjun sneered. The soul of a mysterious realm, and one that can be taken away. Do you think it's something that happens every year? Not only does it not happen every year, it might not even happen for hundreds of years. You little brat, holding him in your hands, humph. When the time comes, it's. At this point, the White Hell King suddenly hesitated, as though he had thought of something. He didn't speak. Not only did he not speak, even the sneer and anger on his face disappeared. After staring at Li Yunxin for a while, he suddenly giggled and said, "Let's do it this way." He circled around Li Yunxin a few times. "I'll lend it to you for now, but since Ben Jun sold you this favor, I will have to repay it." Li Yunxin looked back at him. After a while he said, "Tell me about it." Bai Yanjun shrugged. "You're a smart kid. Back then, on the roadside outside the wilderness forest, you should have died when you slept with that Lao Dao, but I spared you. After that, you went to the city of Wei to fight with Bai Yunxin and Long Jiu. You deserve to die too. It's only because I gave you the method of possession that you survived. Not to mention the fact that you've become a judge of the Yang realm, and that I've borrowed millions of yin souls from you. You should know that it was not because Ben Jun saw that you were good-looking that I helped you again and again." Li Yunxin thought about it and nodded slightly. "You're right. It's not that you wanted to help me, but someone asked you to help me. You had no choice but to do it." Bai Yanjun coughed slightly. What do you know? Let's not talk about this. Let's just talk about the things that you've done. A few months ago, you were just a rogue Taoist in the state of the outer fringe. Now you've become a great demon in the state of true state. Not many people in the world would have such a good encounter. Then you should know that I'm helping you, because I have something for you to do." Li Yunxin was silent for a while. He sighed. "I understand. It's all a routine. Tell me, what do you want me to do?" Bai Yanjun stared at him with a pair of dark eyes. He said slowly, "I want you to call Daotong Kenzo and the demons to fight it out." Li Yunxin was slightly stunned when he heard this. He thought for a while and raised his head. "But they're about to fight now. If you're talking about stirring up trouble and fanning the flames, you should know about the Freemasonry. They've been doing it longer than me. Their tricks are deeper than mine, and their results are better than mine." Bai Yanjun stared at him. Since you know about those things, things will be easy. Not only do I want you to call Daotong, Kenzo, and the demons to fight, but I also want you to drag the Freemasonry into it. Ask the three of them to fight together. The bigger the better. It's best." He thought for a while. "Let them all die." Li Yunxin's expression did not change. Even the sharpest person would not be able to tell what he was thinking. He stood on the spot and thought about what Bai Yanjun said. He thought for a long time before he frowned. What do you mean? You told me before that your and the Black Yama King's job is to maintain the stability and prosperity of the world, so that the people in the human world can live and multiply. But you should know what it means if a full-scale war breaks out between the three parties. No one can escape the flames of war. Many people will die. What do you mean by asking me to do such a thing? Bai Yanjun raised his eyebrows. Times have changed. I haven't come to look for you for so many days. Don't you want to know why? Li Yunxin thought for a while. No. Bai Yanjun blinked. He seemed to be used to Li Yunxin's merciless answer and reaction. He continued to say, "We are not those stupid animals that only know how to eat and breed. We want to take care of the people in the world and let them multiply and multiply. Naturally, we have a motive. It's just that we didn't need it in the past, but we need it now. This kind of thing. I am also unwilling." Li Yunxin sighed. "Listening to you, you really have a lot of negative energy. Every time, it would wear away the little bit of hope and vision I had for the world. Then tell me, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to do this? You are after all celestial beings, immortals. What kind of things are you? I am so strange." Bai Yanjun didn't care about his sarcasm. He just continued. "Because it's not good to tell you everything. There are too many things you don't know. But I want you to do something, so I can't leave you without a clue. So now let me ask you. You only know that there are celestial beings in this world. You think that celestial beings are superior and enjoy immortal happiness forever. But you also think that the world is prosperous and orderly. But have you ever thought that celestial beings also have troubles? There are two kinds of troubles for celestial beings. One is an ancient devil, and the other is a true devil." It took Li Yunxin a while to realize that these two words weren't periosteum and hazelnut mushroom. It wasn't that he wanted to argue, but because he had never heard of these two words. Whether it was folklore or Taoist scriptures, or even the illusions passed by word of mouth among cultivators. These two words didn't exist. The only thing that was similar to these two words probably meant that the art saint of the previous generation was possessed by the devil. This was such a strange thing. Even the cultivators who claimed to know most of the world's secrets were so unfamiliar with these two words. This really piqued his interest. He frowned and asked, "An ancient devil and a true devil? What do you mean? A cultivator who has entered the demonic path? Or a celestial being who has entered the demonic path? Is it two kinds or just two people?" Bai Yanjun said to him solemnly, "You don't need to ask these questions for now. In short, you have to know that this world isn't as peaceful as you think. And you have to do this job well." Li Yunqin thought for a moment. "Why me?" "Because I have tested you before. And I already know that you are the most suitable." Bai Yanjun stopped smiling and became serious. "I say that you are a human, but you don't have much humanity. I say that you are a demon, but you are not only fierce and cruel. Besides, you don't care about this world, and you don't care about these people. You are the most suitable to do this kind of thing." Some of the words he mentioned made Li Yunqin slightly apprehensive. He thought about it seriously again and said, "Then in your place, I'm just a tool. What if I succeed?" Bai Yanjun looked at him. "That depends on your luck. Even I don't know what will happen in the future." "It sounds like an unscrupulous boss giving you an IOU." Li Yunqin sighed. "What if I don't do it? Since you said that I am the most suitable, and you spent so much effort on me. Can I talk about the conditions?" Bai Yanjun looked at him. Then he slowly approached him and revealed a gloomy smile on his face. "Little man, you should know one thing. When I dote on you, I can let you be willful and naughty. But in some other matters, if you dare to be willful and naughty, I won't dote on you anymore." He slowly floated to Li Yunqin's ear and stuck close to him, whispering, "You think you are special? Oh, you are indeed special. But special people like you, have they never appeared before? If you don't listen, Ben Jun will wait for another few hundred or 1,000 years, and then wait for someone like you." After saying this, he suddenly retreated, returning to the darkness in the sky. He stared at Li Yunqin and smiled miserably. "Do your work well. I will not urge you, but you must do your work well. I will watch you." Then he disappeared, and Li Yunqin stood in the same place, blinking his eyes quickly several times. Should not have misunderstood, right? For the first time in his life, he doubted his ability to understand. He recalled the last few sentences of Bai Yanjun over and over again, trying to analyze them from other angles. But after trying a few times, he realized it should be the meaning that he understood. He knew that he was a traveler. When he slowly came back to his senses, he felt a slight chill on his back. He was sweating just now, and now the wind was blowing. Li Yunqin stood in the same place for a while, then let out a long and gentle sigh. Then he walked to the side and stood against the rock wall, hiding himself in the darkness to think about some things. Today, Bai Yanjun was not his usual self, actually threatening him with such a tyrannical attitude. He thought that he would give in. Of course he would give in. What a joke. That was the Yama King. If not for the lack of nutrition factors like attitude, what he wanted him to do was exactly what he wanted to do. It was just that the path had to be changed a little, the method had to be adjusted, and the vision had to be broadened. At least at this stage. Probably the Yama King also knew that this was an extremely complicated and difficult thing. So he said, "I will not urge you. According to the concept of time of those celestial beings and immortals, it would be a very, very long time." But Li Yunqin had always been a curious person. Therefore, he had a very strong desire to know what the big events, the ancient devils, and the true devils were, which he had never even heard of. Moreover, people like to talk nonsense like controlling their own destiny. He came to this world and knew that there was a way to go against the natural order of cultivation, so of course this desire was even stronger. But now he became very unhappy. He knew that something might happen in this world, but he did not know what exactly is going to happen. This made him feel powerless to go with the flow. Personally, this feeling was too annoying. Chapter 256. Therefore, he closed his eyes and pondered in the demon's cave, beside the blood feast of human flesh. He needed to change the strategy that he had been thinking about every day. But this change could not be done overnight. Things happened so suddenly that he had to make every second count. Li Yunxin knew that he had been carefully walking on a tightrope that traversed the cliff. On one side of the tightrope was the Daotong Kenzo, and on the other side was the heterodox demon. On the tightrope, he could see the blue sky and white clouds. But once something went wrong, coupled with a little bad luck, he would fall into the abyss of eternal damnation. In the past, he had more or less placed his hopes on Bai Yanjun's special care for him. But now he realized that the others' care must have something to ask of him. And he knew that he was not the only one. What Bai Yanjun said to him meant that there were others who had done the same thing and received the same care, but failed. He was not the only one. He had to prove his worth, so that he could exchange for a greater value. Damn it. Li Yunxin sighed. He heard footsteps. The footsteps echoed in the long cavern. They were relatively light. Of course, this relatively light was relative to the ordinary monster kings. His own footsteps were also in the relatively light category. Most monster kings were tall and strong. Even if they were not, they would try their best to eat until they were fat. Perhaps this was the primal instinct of wild beasts. The bigger they were, the more intimidating they would be. And he had been waiting here for such a person, refusing to continue walking. Monster kings did not care about inner qualities or talent. Compared to them, he was small, so it was hard to feel close to them. He at least needed a person of similar size as a partner. Such a person would definitely be laughed at. And this kind of ridicule could shorten the distance between two people in a short time. He was the one who liked to trick people. So he looked up and saw a person of the same size as him. People in this world were generally short. In his eyes, the average adult male in the city of Wei was about 165 centimeters tall, and the average female was about 155 centimeters tall. This was because the city of Wei was a big city in the world, and the standard of living was much better. This was a very normal phenomenon. People at this time were short of food and clothing, and they gave birth at an early age. It would be a miracle if she had developed well. It was in such a world that he stood out from the crowd, tall and graceful. Walking on the streets of the city of Wei, there were always people looking at him. However, his physique wasn't considered outstanding among the demons, and could only be considered tall and straight among the cultivators of Daotong and Kenzo. Demons were transformed from beasts, so they always pursued tall and big bodies. On the other hand, cultivators lived in luxury and cultivated their bodies all year round, so it would be strange if they didn't develop well. However, the demon king walking over was similar to him, but slightly wider. His body was rippling with muscles. This demon monarch was dressed in purple, but his upper body only covered his chest and back, revealing a pair of arms with blue veins. The crotch area of his lower body was covered with pink silk, and below that was a pair of short purple pants. I don't know where he got his hands on some silk and brocade, but he didn't care what color or shape they were, and just put them on himself. However, this demon monarch had a pair of big black eyes. When he walked, he looked left and right like a child. Li Yunxin was secretly watching him. The demon king walked to the end of the cliff at the cave entrance, stopped, and looked down. When he saw the scene in the hall, and smelled blood, he frowned. He didn't like this scene. He didn't like the smell either. This made Li Yunxin slightly surprised. There were demons that didn't like blood? So he stood up and walked out of the shadows. I don't like the smell either. The purple-clothed demon monarch obviously didn't get hit on often. Hearing this, he seemed to be surprised. He first looked at Li Yunxin, then looked left and right. Seeing that there was no one around, he knew that the other party was indeed talking to him. So he blinked his eyes, slightly opened his mouth and said, "Ah." This reaction caused Li Yunxin to be slightly stunned in her heart. This was normal for a secular person. He didn't see much of the world, and was timid and shy. Suddenly seeing a stranger talking to him, he nervously blinked his eyes. He opened his mouth slightly, unconsciously revealing his nervousness and surprise. His slightly lengthened middle finger meant that this guy was usually a timid person. But the problem was, this was a Motherf **** king demon monarch. But he still maintained his composure and walked 3 steps forward, smiling and cupping his hands. I'm flowing jade-faced little silver dragon. I came from Dongting to attend the meeting. How should I address this demon monarch? This demon monarch still didn't speak. He stared at Li Yunxin with wide eyes, nervously widening his nostrils, and his face flushed. After a long while he squeezed out a sentence from his throat. I'm old 7. Li Yunxin slightly narrowed his eyes, thought for a while, and then smiled. Old 7, are you the 7th of the evil king's adopted sons? Li Yunxin's tone was gentle, his expression was gentle, and his appearance was even gentler. So this demon monarch who called himself Old 7 slowly calmed down. After calming down, his speech was much smoother, but he was still shy. Ah, yes. I'm the adopted son. I'm Old 7, my adopted father is the evil king. I still have 6 elder brothers, they're all inside. Oh, I'm late. I'm going to be scolded by my elder brothers. After saying this, he hurriedly left, as if he was really afraid of being scolded. Li Yunxin rolled his eyes, and hurriedly stepped forward to stop him. Brother, wait a minute. Since you're late, you'll definitely be scolded if you go like this. Why don't you go with me and say that you saw me on the road and had a pleasant conversation? They can't scold me in front of the guests. Come, tell me which of your 6 elder brothers are. I also admire the reputation of the 7 of you, and I want to make friends with you. There's no time like the present, isn't today a good day? As he said this, he went forward to hold Old 7's hand, and then rubbed his strong and powerful arm. Wow. His muscles were really as hard as steel. Old 7's body was unreasonably hard. To say that it was as hard as steel was not a good description. As a dragon's, Li Yunxin's body was strong, and he could leave a mark on a big rock with just a little bit of force from his fingernails. But when he brushed against Old 7's arm, not even a white mark was left. Old 7's hand was grabbed by Li Yunxin, and he immediately felt embarrassed and wanted to shake it off. Li Yunxin let him be, but after rubbing his arm a few times, he already knew that Old 7's cultivation level was not low, at least not below the transcendent state. He also didn't know what his real body was, but it was able to withstand his grip. Although Old 7 was embarrassed, it seemed that because of the physical contact just now, the distance between him and Li Yunxin seemed to be a little closer. Li Yunxin let go of his hand, sighed, and pretended to be hurt, but he didn't say anything. Old 7 was originally going to shake him off and leave, but when he turned his head to look at him, he couldn't bear to see him like this. He blinked for a while, and then frowned his thick eyebrows and said, Don't be angry. Come, I'll show you a treasure. Finishing, he rubbed his hand across his waist and stared at him impatiently. For some reason, Li Yunxin's hair stood on end from being stared at by him, but he still slowly walked over. Only then did he clearly see the thing that Old 7 had taken out from his waist. Then Li Yunxin frowned, dumbfounded. Old 7's pair of thick and strong hands was actually holding a gourd. Old 7 saw that he was in a daze, and thought that it was his treasure that attracted him. Finally he no longer frowned, and began laughing. Don't be angry. Look at my treasure, it can suck you in. You're called the romantic jade-faced Little Silver. Little Silver, if I call you, do you dare to answer? It would be strange if Li Yunxin agreed. Not only did he not agree, the expression on his face became strange. He took a step back and carefully examined Old 7 from top to bottom. Then his expression became even more strange, and he suddenly asked, Old 7, your big brother, is he very strong? Your second brother, is he able to see far and hear far? Your third brother, is he like a copper head and iron arms? Your fourth brother, is he able to breathe fire? Old 7 did not take his question seriously, and was slightly taken aback. How do you know about this? Then after thinking for a while, he cheerfully nodded his head. Could it be that you're a friend of one of my brothers? Most of the demons had innate abilities. This ability could often be used as a trump card, and would not be easily revealed to the outside world. But the 7 adopted sons of the evil king were also great demons, so it was not strange for them to know about this. After all, they would often fight, and it would be seen by others. Because of this, when Li Yunxin said this, Old Seven felt that perhaps he was acquainted with his brothers in the past. But after saying this, he discovered that Li Yunxin's expression became even more strange. This demon king who called himself Old Seven had never seen such a complicated expression on anyone's face. After a long while, Li Yunxin finally let out a light breath. How could there be such an honor? I've only heard a friend mention it before. I say, Old Seven, one more question. Do you know who the previous one was? If Lao Qi was a clever person, he would probably know what Li Yunxin was asking about. But he looked like a muscular demon, but in fact he was a simple-minded demon. Because of this, Li Yunxin's words caused him to be at a loss, and he could only open his mouth. Ah! Li Yunxin sighed in his heart, and decided to temporarily change the topic. But suddenly, a voice came to his ears. The previous one you mentioned, are you referring to the great demon that was defeated and killed by my adopted father? This was a thick and deep bass voice. It immediately made people think of broad shoulders, a steely chin, rock-like muscles, and other elements of male hormones that were off the charts. Li Yunxin immediately turned his head, but there was no one next to him. So he knew that the other party had used some kind of secret voice transmission type of magical power. This Old Seven spoke and acted like an ordinary person. The voice that came to his ears sounded serious, and did not have the viciousness or ruthlessness of ordinary demons. Adding on the adopted father in his words, Li Yunxin knew that it should be one of the older brothers of Old Seven. Perhaps the method of secret voice transmission was rare among the demons, but it was not difficult for cultivators. Li Yunxin smiled, his lips moving slightly as he said soundlessly, "It sounds like this is Old Seven's second brother. I am the flowing jade-faced little silver. I came here today with the intention of making friends with everyone." He paused for a moment, then a bold idea suddenly flashed through his mind. He used a second to consider the cause and effect, then added another sentence. "I want to discuss important matters with Old Seven." The other party did not immediately reply. Li Yunxin then turned his head to look at the hall. There were people coming and going in the hall, light and shadow crisscrossing. Li Yunxin used 2 or 3 seconds to see the people he was looking for. The 6 demon kings were sitting towards the north of the hall. Although the demons did not like the etiquette of the human world, but they still had to pay attention to seniority. So after transforming into a human, they had to learn some of the customs and hierarchy of the human world. For example, the seating in the hall was very particular. Those little demon kings that did not make the mark were sitting cross-legged, and those that were slightly more powerful had a stone platform. If they were more skilled, they would have stone stools. But if they were a bit more serious, they would have large stone tables and tall stone chairs. Right now, the 6 demon kings that Li Yunxin saw were sitting on chairs that were cut out from a large piece of stone. Although they were not as tall as the other demons, but they were all as muscular as Old Seven, and had an awe-inspiring aura. His gaze found them, and found that the 6 demon kings had long been looking in this direction. Their eyes shone brightly in the light of the fire, and he could still feel the essence within them from such a distance. Li Yunxin saw their attire. The clothes of these 6 brothers were similar to Old Seven, only the color was different. Eldest brother wore red clothes, second brother wore orange clothes, third brother wore yellow clothes, fourth brother wore green clothes, fifth brother wore green clothes, and sixth brother wore blue clothes. This Old Seven was red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple. Li Yunxin looked carefully, and a strange smile appeared on his face. Then, he cupped his hands towards them from afar, and turned to Old Seven. "Seventh brother, I've already met the 6 brothers. Please introduce me to him." Looking at the dumb and shy Old Seven, of course he did not know what Li Yunxin was thinking, but he really liked this new friend. Where else could he find such a gentle and beautiful person among the demons who could talk? Moreover, the 7 brothers were different from most of the demons in the hall. For example, the demons liked to eat blood, but the 7 brothers hated it. Now the 6 of them only drank water in this hall, and even the little demons of Pitfall Mountain did not approach them. They just gave them food and ran away, as if afraid that the smell of blood would rush into the 6 brothers' noses. Thus, old Seven agreed, and pulled Li Yunxin's hand down the cliff. Moreover, as soon as he entered the hall, the noise in the hall immediately died down. Old Seven looked bashful, and was even more nervous now that there were many people around. Once he was nervous, his face would tighten. He was big and burly, with a green chin, thick eyebrows, and a face full of muscles. No matter what the reason was, when he tightened his face, it was scary to look at. And he was one of the evil king's adopted sons. The demons in the hall made way for him. They looked at Li Yunxin, and then looked at the gourd on old Seven's waist, and knew that it was also a rare magic weapon. The two of them went straight to the north of the hall. After they left, the demons went back to their own business. Their thoughts were always less than humans. When Li Yunxin and old Seven got closer, they saw the orange-robed Yao King stand up, tightly pursed his lips, and stared at Li Yunxin. Old Seven was slightly frightened by his brother's gaze, and was afraid of being scolded. Li Yunxin knew that it was not directed at him. He patted old Seven's shoulder and walked over. He walked in front of old Six, until he was in front of second brother. However, the expression on his face had changed. If it was a worldly person who had experienced many things in the world, it was not difficult for them to understand what Li Yunxin's expression meant. He frowned slightly, narrowed his eyes, and slightly opened his mouth. His gaze swept past the monster kings one by one, but he was sure that every single one of them was carefully sizing them up. When he slowly walked over, he would even shake his head in an almost imperceptible manner and sigh a few times. When he walked in front of second brother and looked away from old Seven, his chest rose and fell rapidly, and he closed his eyes, and then calmed down. Then he looked at second brother with a loving gaze and sighed. "You're so strong now." This second brother was known for his clairvoyant and clairaudient skills. Previously, when he heard Li Yunxin talking to his seventh brother on the cliff, he was suspicious, so he invited Li Yunxin here. When he saw Li Yunxin, he felt that Li Yunxin was unfamiliar and strange. As a result, his vigilance increased. But who would have guessed that this fellow would suddenly act like this, and use such an expression to stand in front of him, and say such words? Second brother was taken aback. The 6 Yao Kings subconsciously looked at each other. In the words of the human world, it was looking at each other. Because the attitude of this flirtatious jade-faced little silver dragon was like an old man in the human world who had been separated from his children and grandchildren for a long time. After many years, when he returned home and saw that his children and grandchildren had all grown up, but did not recognize him, his heart was filled with pain and pity, but also a bit of relief. Together with that, "You're so strong now." The 6 were somewhat dumbfounded. They did not know where this little silver dragon came from. The second brother was stunned for a moment before he frowned. He knew that this person might not be ordinary. He had asked about that person before. His 7th brother was young and did not understand, but the 6 of them understood. The person that little silver dragon spoke of was the great demon that was defeated by the evil king a long time ago. As for the 7 of them, they were previously the subordinates of that great demon. As for how he became the adopted son of the evil king, and why he was willing to be his adopted son, the story was much more complicated. Therefore he looked at Li Yunxin, hesitated slightly, then said in a low voice, "Who exactly are you? The things that you ask are not good to ask here." Then he raised his head and looked around, then added, "My adoptive father is not willing to hear such words." But this little silver dragon did not seem to care about the evil king at all. He lightly shook his head. "You 7 children, do you still remember his name? Now that you're here, you don't even dare to mention his name?" The demon king being called a child should have made him furious. If it were any other demon, they would be even more furious. Their brains were too lazy to think. But these 6 people seemed to be those rare intelligent people that Li Yunxin loved dearly. First they were stunned, then silent. Then, the expression on second brother's face became more and more gentle. But within this gentleness, there was an obvious pretense of anger and indifference in Li Yunxin's eyes. Snorting coldly, "What is there to be afraid to mention? Us 7 brothers used to be the great demon of the mysterious realm, known as Old Demon Fulu. So what if we say it? Chapter 257. Li Yunxin's expression paused on his face for a while. In other words, it was sluggish. But this was not a pretense. Such an expression, in the eyes of the second brother, was this little silver dragon did not expect that he would really dare to say it. But only Li Yunxin himself knew why it was like this. After a moment of sluggishness, he lightly exhaled, the expression on his face relaxing. So it was like this. He said to himself in an extremely soft voice. When he saw the seventh brother, at the entrance of the cave, he felt that he was familiar. After talking with him for a while, he had already come to a conclusion. And saying all this now was just to prove. Fuck. This really was the 7 Calabash brothers. In this world, there was only one person who would have such a bad taste. And there was only one person who was highly similar to what he knew. The painting saint. That guy. Just how many things had he done in this world? Li Yunxin did not believe that because of some kind of coincidence, there was an evil king in this world. He felt that this was the Scorpion King. And these 7 adopted sons, they were clearly the Calabash brothers. Just now, he had forced out another key character. Old Demon Falu. He really did not know how to evaluate the bad taste of that person 2,000 years ago. That was clearly Old Calabash brother. Li Yunxin was almost certain that these people were created by the painting saint. Just like how he created the dragon lady that was possessed by the 3 flowers. But the problem was, why did that person do this? It was normal for the painting saint to leave behind strange words and strange paintings. But even if it was the painting saint, to create so many great demons, he must have expended a lot of effort. That day, when he Li Yunxin created the body of the dragon lady for Mrs. Sanhua, he almost dropped a realm. And he only created an empty realm body. What kind of price did the painting saint have to pay for such a big move? But in reality, there was another explanation. Most of the time, Li Yunxin would say some absurd things. Previously, when he was imparting life experience to a group of unruly Taoists in Wei City's Jade Flower Pavilion, he said Gu Nala Black Demon Immortal. Later on, he called himself Tang Xuanzang. And later on, he said that he was some flirtatious jade-faced little lewd dragon. He often spoke words that the people of this world did not understand. In addition to the reason that his psychological defense mechanism did not want him to completely expose his heart to the world, it was also because he was releasing information. It was like the scent released by a beast when it was in heat, could be smelled by the opposite sex from more than 10 kilometers away. And then thousands of troops would come to meet it. He was the same. He knew there were others like him in the world. If there were any of his kind in the world who had heard any of these strange things he uttered, they would have been aware of his existence. He wanted to find them. Perhaps some people would hide themselves if they were in the same situation as him. He and the enemy were both in the dark, waiting for the right time to expose the enemy, or himself, before making a decision. But the problem was that not everyone in the world liked this kind of style. For Li Yunxin, he preferred to see both sides bare their fangs and claws, and then have a thrilling battle. He didn't want to wait. He wanted to find friends or enemies. He wanted to attack. But now, the art saint seemed to have the same view and attitude as him. That saint left clues everywhere in this world that only certain people could understand. In the eyes of the natives of this world, there was nothing special. However, once people like Li Yunxin saw it, it was like a torch in the dark, extremely bright and dazzling. The problem was, who did the art saint want to show it to? Why did he create such a group of demons in this place? But these were not questions that he could figure out at the moment. He restrained his expression in front of second brother, exhaled again, and said indifferently in a relieved and gratified tone, "Okay, you still remember him." Li Yunxin was good at reading people. This kind of reading included, and was not limited to the character, psychology, behavior, and habits of people, but also many small details and big situations. He was worried about one thing before. The seventh brother looked bashful, but this bashful was only relative to the demons. For example, a child was innocent and cute. When he was innocent and cute, he was chasing butterflies under the shade of the tree. then his innocence and cuteness were not shared with the butterflies. Li Yunxin was worried that the bashful seventh brother would shyly walk in front of a person, and then smile shyly while shyly crushing that person's head. That would not be cute at all. So when they walked through the hall just now, he paid attention to every movement of the seventh brother's eyes. Then he realized that the seventh brother was very unwilling to see this scene. Not because of too noisy or bad smell, but because he couldn't bear it. This meant that this demon might be kinder than Li Yunxin himself. It was because of this conclusion that he did what he did in front of second brother. Because he had to take a risk to do something. He had to convince the demons. Even if he could not convince the demons, he had to convince the evil king. Even if he could not convince the evil king, he had to make him agree with his point of view on other things. Before he came here, he had a set of plans in his mind. However, the appearance of Bai Yanjun forced him to adjust his plan. He had to ask himself to achieve the purpose of this trip in the shortest time. Therefore, he had to take risks based on his bold assumptions and inferences. However, once he was in such a predicament, he felt his blood was boiling. The sense of anxiety and powerlessness brought by being trapped in Dongting disappeared in an instant. His heart began to beat happily. He felt that he was on a wonderful and exciting battlefield again. He loved the feeling of knowing a person, and then playing with him. It made him feel like he was the king of the world. This kind of abnormal excitement made Li Yunxin happy. It even made him completely immersed in the role and become the person he had set for himself. He asked about old demon Fulu, in front of second brother, just to see how the seven brothers treated that person. This was the first dangerous move. If the seven brothers now really joined the evil king, he would get himself into trouble by asking about this. If he fought with the seven brothers, he would have nothing to do today. However, seventh brother's reaction made him sure of his judgment. Second brother's words also made him understand that the seven brothers didn't really follow the evil king. They still remembered old demon Fulu. Yes or no? He gambled based on the clues and got the result today. Until now, he began to make the second dangerous move. The evil king would probably show up soon. He had to temporarily deal with the seven brothers before the evil king appeared. And whether or not this risky move would be correct would depend on whether the painting saint from a long, long time ago was professional and meticulous in his work, or if he was bored enough. Just as he expected, after hearing him say, "You still remember him?" the seven brothers' faces became more and more doubtful. They looked at each other again. Second brother frowned and asked, "Who are you?" Li Yunxin smiled slightly. "I know you seven brothers are not actually demons. You are different from them." He raised his hand and pointed at the monster kings who were feasting in the distance. "You are not the same kind of people as them. You are brothers on the vine. And your adoptive father, Humph. I'm afraid you came to this world because of your adoptive father. Now that I've said all this, you seven children, can you guess who I am?" Then he realized that he had made the right move. Second brother and the others showed imperceptible surprise on their faces. But Li Yunxin looked deeper. He found that there was a trace of doubt in their surprise. Because of this doubt, second brother frowned and asked, "You, could it be that you are Grandpa Mountain Gods?" From Li Yunxin's point of view, this was a simple and plain little wisdom of the supporting characters. Second brother thought he had done enough, but the subtle expression on his face still betrayed him. This was a trap. They didn't know anything about Grandpa Mountain God, and just wanted to test if Li Yunxin really knew something. If he said yes, it must be a lie. But such a trap could still reveal something. These seven monster kings were said to have been the evil king's adoptive sons for hundreds of years. For such a long time, they would not always be naive children. They must have done a lot of things that they should have done. Then would a man in his 50s or 60s like to call someone grandpa or uncle? But second brother said Grandpa Mountain God, in a subtle manner. This was the perspective of a child. When this monster king was testing Li Yunxin, he subconsciously put himself in the perspective of a child. This meant that there was a reference or a candidate in his mind. Because of the existence of this candidate, he subconsciously substituted a similar character to test himself. Li Yunxin knew that he had made the right bet again. The art saint was really bored. He really came up with the guy that he expected. And now the person in second brother's mind must be that guy. So he smiled leniently. You are second brother, but it is always you talking to me, because you are smart and smart. He then turned to look at big brother, who wanted to say something but hesitated. You are the big brother. You are very strong, but it is a pity that you are reckless. He then looked at third brother and smiled. You are afraid of being spanked. Fourth brother, you are afraid of the cold. As he said this, the few of them showed a surprised expression. Perhaps some of them knew, but they could point out their weaknesses one by one. Li Yunqin sighed and said, if my old friend was here, he would also smile when he saw you guys like this. At this moment, second brother could no longer hide his thoughts. All the words in his heart were written on his face. He only stared and opened his mouth. Are you that pangolin? What Grandpa said was true. Li Yunqin heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. He smiled. Yes. Your grandpa should have told you. How did the evil king come about that day? You chiseled through the mountain and released him. There was no need for Li Yunqin to guide him. Second brother told her everything. Grandpa said that it was you who released the evil king by accident, and it was you who found Grandpa and took the precious gourd seeds with him. Then we were born. But I have never seen you before. I only heard from Grandpa. You actually really have you. Li Yunqin sighed in his heart. That art saint, just how bored was he? He put on a show and even made up the background story. But since the art saint did such a thing, Li Yunqin also guessed that he had done such a thing. Now, his speculation was exactly the same as the art saint's thinking 2,000 years ago. This made Li Yunqin more and more eager to know what kind of person he was. He often saw bits and pieces of the art saint left behind in this world, as if that person was an invisible person who always lingered around him. He even felt that if that person was still alive, it was very likely that he would become his friend. A truly interesting and crazy friend that Li Yunqin recognized from the bottom of his heart. So he became more and more excited, not only because he was about to control these 7 silly children in such a short time, but also because he always felt that there was a deeper meaning behind the things that the art saint left here. Or was it because he felt that there was a deeper meaning behind what the art saint had left behind? Or because he always felt that the things that the art saint left here had a deeper meaning? So he sighed again. Of course there is me. But these years I have hidden my identity, sigh. So he sighed again. Of course there is me. After he said this, he looked around. The demon blood feast was still going on, and the screams of agony could be heard without end. After saying this, he looked around. The demon blood feast was still going on, and the screams were endless. But the demon king's laughter and curses were louder. At first there were some fellows who were looking at them, but they soon lost interest when they saw that they were neither eating nor fighting. 200 to 300 demon kings would attend the meeting. At this time, there were already more than 100 people, and the hall was becoming increasingly crowded. Li Yunqin realized that she didn't have much time left. Evil King was probably going to appear soon. Li Yunqin realized that there was not much time left for him. The Evil King was probably going to appear. In the next moment, his arms were covered with greenish-gray scales that were as hard as iron. This was the true form of the demon. In this way, he once again proved his identity. After all, it was difficult for the 7 brothers to tell the difference between a dragon's scale and a pangolin's scale. Then he moved closer, and the smile on his face disappeared. Old Demon Falu is an old friend of mine. Before this, I wasn't free and could only watch him suffer, Li Yunqin said in a low voice while glaring at them. Now that I'm free, I'm going to avenge him. I know all the reasons and difficulties you children have. It's just that you have to help me with something today. Just as he said this, 3 horns sounded from the hollow mountain. It was unknown what the bugle horn was made of, but it was deep and powerful. Then it circled around the mountain, causing everyone to tremble slightly. Then a little demon monster with a loud voice shouted majestically, "The evil king has arrived." As Li Yunqin spoke, she looked up and saw a majestic demon wearing purple armor, with a green face and fangs, and a pair of moon-white, dark brown spotted horns on the sides of his ears slowly descending from the darkness above her. The evil king has arrived. As soon as the evil king entered, The demons in the hall immediately stopped talking. Although there were still some muddle-headed little demons who drank too much and were still making noise, some armored demons from the Pitfall Mountain had already landed in the crowd. Seeing those who were drunk and didn't listen to the dissuasion, the demons didn't ask whose subordinates they were and just hit their heads with a mace. Their heads were smashed into pieces, and they no longer made noise. Because of this thunderous method of clearing the hall finally quieted down. Before this, Li Yunxin had seized the last moment and stared at the second brother. Help me persuade the evil king to go to Dongting and fight with the Daotong Kenzo. If it's done, the old demon Falu in the netherworld. He stopped talking, because the last noisy little demon was also killed by the demons from the Pitfall Mountain. The evil king finally landed. Ignoring the big monster kings, he separated from the crowd and came to the north. He saw his 7 adopted sons and Li Yunxin. The big monster in the mysterious realm laughed 3 times, showing a pair of pale fangs in his mouth. Ha ha ha, my good children. Who is this? When he spoke, he stared at Li Yunxin with his beady eyes under his thick eyebrows. I saw you talking for a long time just now. Now that I look at it again. Why does this guest smell like a human? As the evil king said this, the monster kings around him immediately glared at him fiercely. Li Yunxin instantly became the focus of attention. Chapter 258. Li Yunxin didn't speak, but looked at the 7 brothers beside him. He had already used a lot of methods just now, which was why he felt that the 7 of them would probably listen to him. Even if they were still hesitant and could not make the final decision, they would at least play along with the evil king for the time being, so that he could deceive them. However, he didn't expect that the words he said and the momentum he created just now seemed to be very effective. It was so good that the 7 brothers were still in a state of turmoil, even to the point where they couldn't control themselves. They seemed to be trying hard to calm their emotions, but it wasn't very successful. When Li Yunxin looked at them, he found that the eldest brother was staring straight at the evil king with a pair of big black eyes, almost spitting out flames. He also felt that it was inappropriate, so he quickly lowered his head to hide his expression. If he was alone, it wouldn't be a problem. But the problem was, almost all 7 of them were like this. The evil king originally stared fiercely at Li Yunxin, but now, when he looked at his adopted sons again, he found that they all had the same expression on their faces. He immediately became confused. The profound realm great demon's eyes moved back and forth between Li Yunxin and his 7 adopted sons, and finally frowned even more tightly. He reached out his hand and pointed at the most innocent and shy 7th brother, saying in a deep voice, "7th brother, what's wrong with you?" Then he squinted at Li Yunxin. "What did this person say to you?" So Li Yunxin realized that he seemed to have made a mistake. He underestimated the 7's feelings for the old demon Falu. He thought that the 7 of them had been the evil king's adopted sons for hundreds of years. And even if he made them believe that he was really the old friend of the old demon Falu, they would still hesitate for a while. After weighing the pros and cons, they would completely accept the path and fate he had arranged for them, and then they would worry about how to take revenge and how to deal with the evil king. But he forgot something else. The emotions of the demons were pure and strong. He had experienced it once before with the Lord Dongting. But now he was speculating about the demons' actions based on human feelings. No matter why the 7 of them had endured for hundreds of years under the evil king's throne, now that he mentioned the past, it was like lightning stirring the fire, causing the accumulated resentment in their hearts to pour out in torrents. The outpouring this time was so fierce that even the 7 of them almost couldn't control themselves. And now that the evil king asked the 7th brother, the 7th brother no longer lowered his head. He stared at the evil king with wide eyes, and after a while he suddenly said, "We won't be fooled by you again." Li Yunxin sighed as soon as she said this. He began to size up the demon kings behind the Diablo king and estimate their strength. Once again, he observed the terrain of the cave to see if the escape route that he had prepared beforehand would be useful at this time. But in the next moment, he noticed something strange. There was something off about the evil king's demeanor. Logically speaking, under the premise that evil king killed old demon Fulu and adopted the 7 brothers as his sons through some means, he should also be wary of the 7 brothers. And if they were on guard, they would more or less be prepared for the possibility of them betraying them. Then at this moment, they should have revealed a cold and sinister smile on their faces. Then, they should have realized that these 7 brothers are indeed preparing to betray us. But now, the only expression on Evil King's face was shock. The Evil King's true form was a giant scorpion. He had transformed into a human, but the skin on his face was still harder than that of a normal person, so his expression was not obvious. But now his mouth was half open, and the 2 big fangs in his mouth opened and closed subconsciously. Li Yunxin thought that this should be his way of expressing his surprise. The Evil King froze for a moment before asking, "What are you talking about?" Then she looked at Li Yunxin. "Who exactly are you?" Since the 7th brother said that, the other 6 brothers didn't hide it anymore. Second brother snorted and jumped out from behind the stone platform to stand guard in front of Li Yunxin. He glared at the Evil King and pointed at him. "Hey, who do you think he is? Do you remember who let you out? He was that pangolin. You deceived us so much." After second brother spoke, the other 5 brothers glared at the Evil King. The 7 brothers stood in front of Li Yunxin like a wall of flesh, protecting him behind them, as if they were afraid that he would make any mistakes. Normally, at this point, the Evil King should have already turned hostile. But what surprised Li Yunxin even more was that when he looked at the Evil King through the gap between the 7 brothers, he found that the Evil King was even more surprised. This surprise didn't seem to be fake. A profound realm big demon had no reason to pretend in front of so many small demons. "What is going on?" the Evil King said in surprise again. "Pangolin? Which pangolin? Hey, you 7 silly boys, you didn't believe me, but chose to believe this." At this point he raised his eyebrows and shouted angrily, "Who is this person? How did he sneak in? Guards!" As he shouted, the hundreds of demons behind him responded in unison. But the Evil King didn't want them. But the snake spirit 7 Duan Jin, who was guarding the entrance of the Pitfall Mountain. The snake spirit came quickly. She probably heard the news from the small demons in the cave, and knew that something had happened. When the Evil King shouted again, the snake spirit hurriedly separated the crowd and walked forward. But she didn't panic. While walking leisurely, she looked at Li Yunxin through the gap between the 7 brothers. After a few glances, she came to the side of the tall Evil King and bowed slightly. "Your Majesty, don't be angry. I knew something was wrong with this person just now, and I let him in on purpose. Your Majesty, please listen to me." The Evil King was tall, twice as long as Li Yunxin. This snake spirit was unusually tall among humans, but she only reached the Evil King's waist. After she said so, the Evil King frowned again and bent down so that the snake spirit could whisper in his ear. After listening to 7 Duan Jin's whisper, his brows finally relaxed. Good, good, good." The Evil King stared at Li Yunxin. "So you're a cultivator?" This time, it was Li Yunxin's turn to be surprised. But as surprised as he was, he never thought that everything would be smooth sailing for him. So he only took a step back, a little further away from the 7 brothers, and said, "I think the Evil King has misunderstood. I'm not a cultivator. I'm the same as everyone here. A demon, a spirit, but definitely not a human." The 7 brothers in front of him seemed a little confused. They didn't know why 7 Duan Jin and the Evil King said that Li Yunxin was a cultivator. So they looked at each other, and then turned to look at Li Yunxin. At this time, the Evil King laughed 3 times. "You're not a cultivator. How can you see my real eye?" As he said this, he waved his hand, and the iron plate that Li Yunxin saw flew out of 7 Duan Jin's sleeve and fell into his hand. At the entrance of the cave, Li Yunxin saw that this thing was as tall as him. Right now, when Evil King held it in his hand, it was as if he was holding a slightly larger book. The Evil King took the magic treasure and didn't make any movements, but just shook the real eye. The scene in front of them suddenly changed. They were no longer surrounded by the blazing cavern of the Pitfall Mountain. Instead, they were surrounded by a hill. Not only did the scene change, even the season seemed to have changed. It was supposed to be summer. Near the city of Wei, the weather was especially hot. But now it suddenly became cool, or even slightly cold. Li Yunxin stood beside the 7 brothers, and in front of them was a big green stone. Next to the green stone was a crooked pine tree. The pine needles on the tree were sparse and dark green. The tall evil king and the petite snake stood under the pine tree, and behind them was the endless mountains. Looking at the time, it was dusk. The sun was about to set, casting its last afterglow on this world. The setting sun turned everyone golden, and the leaves in the distance looked even more yellow. This should be somewhere in the north. Li Yunxin couldn't figure out if the evil king really moved them to a place in an instant, or if it was an illusion. If it was an illusion, he was a Taoist priest. Among the 3 types of cultivators, Taoist priest, swordsman, and Taoist priest, the latter was the best at illusion. But even if Li Yunxin mobilized the spiritual power in his body to find the flaw of this illusion, he had no clue. Everything around him was incomparably real, without the slightest trace of artificiality. But if it was a real world, where did the evil king get such supernatural power? It should be caused by the magic treasure in his hand, the real eye? But this scene was inexplicably familiar. But no matter how hard Li Yunxin thought, he couldn't think of where he had seen it before. While he was stunned, the evil king sneered. "You are already in my treasure, don't think of escaping. Let me ask you, you say you are a demon, but how did you see my real eye?" The 7 brothers stood in front of Li Yunxin and were about to speak, but the evil king was already impatient. As if there were only the few of them here, he no longer had the fatherly attitude from before. The great demon of the mysterious realm waved his hand, but he couldn't feel any demonic power or spiritual power. The 7 brothers were stunned, as if time had stopped for them. Then, the evil king waved his hand again, and the 7 muscular fiendish demons lined up in a row and rolled down the hill. Seeing this scene, Li Yunxin frowned. The snake spirit laughed lightly at the side. "You flirtatious jade-faced little silver dragon. I'm afraid you still don't know where you gave yourself away. Do you still remember the thing I told you to look at when you entered the door?" There was a hole in that metal plate, and in the hole was a black dot. Qi Duanjin looked at Li Yunxin and sneered. "I asked you what you saw, and you said you saw an eye. It should be a tiger or leopard. But you didn't know, this was the real eye. The demons can only see a black dot. Only cultivators that practice Heaven's Will technique can see the real thing. You saw through it with one glance. If it's not a cultivator, what else could it be?" As Qi Duanjin said this, the evil king looked at him coldly, waiting to see how Li Yunxin would explain. But the 2 demons immediately discovered that there was something wrong with the expression on Li Yunxin's face. He didn't look like someone who had fallen into a desperate situation and found out that he had been seen through. He was originally frowning and thinking about something. Hearing Qi Duanjin's words, he frowned and thought for a while. Then his eyes suddenly lit up. Then, he slowly turned around and carefully looked at his surroundings. After looking for a long time, his face finally revealed a shocked and uncertain expression. But this expression disappeared in a flash. It became even more strange and complicated. The evil king and Qi Duanjin didn't know what that expression meant. Only Li Yunxin himself knew. He ran into a treasure and solved a mystery that had existed in his heart for more than 10 years. It was actually in this place, and it was actually this kind of thing. The evil king didn't like his bluff. He glared and said in a low voice, "You arrogant fellow, are you still thinking of some escape plan? This king will break your arms and legs. Let's see if you'll speak the truth." After saying this, he put his fingers together and pointed at Li Yunxin. With just one finger, Li Yunxin, this dragon son of the true realm, was completely unable to move his arms and legs. Any cultivator would panic in such a situation, not because he was trapped, but because he couldn't feel any spiritual or demonic energy at all. It was as if his body was suddenly isolated from this world, and he had lost contact with it. But this kind of panic didn't appear on Li Yunxin's face. On the contrary, he turned his eyes to look around, and when he was sure that he really couldn't move, he laughed loudly. Good, 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 good. It really is such a treasure. The evil king ignored him. With a gloomy face, he hooked his finger and pulled Li Yunxin over. He didn't say anything else. He took out a thick broadsword out of nowhere and swung it. With a slashing sound, Li Yunxin was cut into two halves by his saber. He was cut in half at the waist, and his lower body fell to the ground. But he still seemed to be restrained, and even blood couldn't flow out. The evil king cut him and sneered. Hee hee, it doesn't hurt or itch, right? Let me tell you, I used a magic weapon to restrain you and cut off your 5 senses. When I get rid of this restraint, I guarantee that you will be in so much pain that you won't be able to live or die. Now quickly tell me everything in detail. This magic weapon of mine is still here. Maybe I can be merciful and reattach your body. Li Yunxin, on the other hand, only turned her eyes to look at the half of her body that had left him. She chuckled and said, "It really doesn't hurt. But, evil king, it might work if you use this method to fool those demon kings under you. If you use it to deal with me, hey, you are a great demon in the mysterious realm. Killing me is as easy as flipping your hand. Why did you have to go through the trouble of restraining me and then killing me? Let me guess. Could it be that this place is an illusion to begin with? In fact, you can't do anything here. So you can only use this method of cutting off your 5 senses to scare people? If you ask me, I feel that I am still in the same place as before." The evil king stared at him and spat. "Bah! Do you know that this treasure of mine is—" But Li Yunxin interrupted him. He looked straight into the evil king's eyes. "Listen to me. Listen to me for a while. Maybe you will get a surprise. TSK. Such a treasure is in your hands, but you can only use it to scare people. Don't you think it is a waste?" The more 7th Duanjin listened to him, the more he frowned. He pulled the evil king's waist. "King, don't listen to his nonsense. He is deceiving you." Li Yunxin sneered again. "Nonsense? You used 2 pieces of iron to tie the treasure left by the art saint, exposed it in broad daylight, and used it to scare people. Do you really think that you are unfathomable and powerful?" As soon as he said this, 7th Duanjin stopped talking. Even the evil king stopped talking. "Put me down," Li Yunxin said to the dumbfounded evil king. "I originally came to harm you, but now I have changed my mind. Put me down, and I might tell you how to use this treasure properly." At this moment, the ruthlessness and awe-inspiring aura on the evil king disappeared. Perhaps Li Yunxin had hit the nail on the head, and he had been thinking about this for a long time, about how to use this treasure properly. Hence, he was stunned for a while before he asked, "Do you really know? Misty Nuda Kaimao is one of the 8 ancient scrolls left behind by the art saint in the past." Li Yunxin glared at him. "Don't you think so?" The evil king finally subconsciously waved his hand. Hence, Li Yunxin regained his senses. Just as he expected, the cutting off of his 5 senses, and being cut in half by the evil king, were just an illusion. He still stood on the same spot. He looked around again, and let out a long sigh. Misty Nuda Kaimao. So this is what it means," he muttered to himself. "What kind of dialect is this?" When he was very young, his parents had mentioned this painting when they taught him about the art of painting. It was one of the 8 ancient scrolls left behind by the art saint. Now it was in the evil king's hands. Chapter 259. Li Yunxin sighs here for a while, but evil king and the snake monster can't bear it anymore. The monster of Xian realm becomes more anxious, because the mysterious guy in front of him may know the secret he has been dreaming of. This is totally different from his usual calm attitude in front of other monsters. He stares at Li Yunxin with his eyes wide open, and a thunderous voice comes out of his mouth. "Are you a cultivator? Are you a Taoist painter? What do you know?" Li Yunxin waves his hand. "Don't panic. I'm more surprised than you. Let me think about it first." He paused for a moment and looked at evil king. "I thought that you and old demon Falu were mortal enemies, and that's why you killed him and gave his 7th child some magic potion to make them your own. I was wrong, wasn't I?" Evil king frowns, but Li Yunxin raises his hands and presses them down slightly to comfort him. Okay, let's talk about me first. I'm not a pangolin. I'm indeed a Taoist painter. But that was when I was alive. Now I'm a monster. Here I am. I was planning to sow discord in your pitfall mountain and let you go to Dongting to die. If a big monster like you fights with the orthodoxy, they won't be distracted and I can get away easily. But now it seems that I have to reconsider. Li Yunqin thinks for a while. For example, let's be friends. Hearing his words, Evil King and the snake monster look at each other. The snake monster is a little stunned, and then she yells, "You are Dragon 9?" Because of her words, the setting sun in the background suddenly falls behind the mountains, and the darkness finally comes. A sudden gust of wind blows between heaven and earth. Autumn leaves and dead branches are flying with the wind, as if a giant above the endless sky takes a deep breath. The remaining dark green pine needles on the old pine next to the big bluestone seem to be startled. They all point at Li Yunqin, as if thousands of pine needles will be shot at him at any time. The shock and puzzlement on Evil King's face faded away. Because of the snake spirit's words, he no longer treated Li Yunqin as a random mysterious enemy, but as an evenly matched opponent. He let out an oppressive and dull voice from his throat. "Longjiao? Ha! You sure have guts. How dare you make trouble in my pitfall mountain instead of staying in your Dongting? Take this." The moment the great fiendish demon's voice faded, the massive mountain-like figure in the darkness pounced forward. As he pounced, the wild wind between heaven and earth dissipated. It no longer blew aimlessly, but became the violent wind pressure that he brought along. Together with the darkness, it rushed towards Li Yunqin with overwhelming force. The distance between the two of them was only a few steps. This pounce was even faster than a galloping horse. Before the snake spirit beside him could see him clearly, with a loud rumbling sound, the two huge bodies collided into each other. However, the Evil King's momentum was clearly a little more violent. The huge black figure directly blasted Li Yunqin, who was in front of him, several meters away. Everything in their way, the trees, rocks, dust, strong winds, and even the endless darkness in the void, was instantly crushed into powder. Moreover, it shot out countless fierce sparks that resembled a sputtering rainstorm. The Evil King's attack only lasted for an instant. The snake spirit Qi Duanjin did not even have the time to dodge the strong wind created by the two people. The figures of the two great fiendish demons had already separated. So the snake spirit saw the true body of the self-proclaimed, romantic jade-faced little silver dragon. He had already become as tall as the Evil King. His body was covered in a steel-like dark green scale armor. A pair of ferocious and terrifying red antlers grew out of his forehead. On his neck was a steel-like white mane. From between the hair and the scales, there was a large amount of mist that rose up, protecting him within. That delicate and handsome human figure with a slender figure. Right now, he had already revealed his true body, turning into a ferocious-looking fiend god. The snake spirit sucked in a breath of cold air. He really was Dragon Son. He was previously speaking frivolously and acting carelessly, but after such a short moment, he had already emitted a terrifying pressure that made it hard for her to breathe. The snake spirit could not help but take a step back. But then she realized that she should not be like this. But she hesitated for 2 breaths of time, and did not dare to take another step forward. Because that was dragons. She gritted her teeth, and looked at her Evil King. When the two of them collided, the scales and carapace fiercely rubbed against each other. The sparks that shot out actually ignited the dry vegetation around them. As a result, she saw the Evil King standing like a mountain not far from Li Yunqin, his face flickering with uncertainty in the flickering firelight. And that Dragon Son was also standing, but there were specks of dark golden blood dripping from his clenched right palm. As soon as it fell to the ground, a cloud of smoke rose up, like hot magma. Dragon Son grinned, revealing his sharp fangs, and smiled coldly. "Evil King, you have great strength. A great demon in the mysterious realm, you live up to your reputation. Thank you." The Evil King did not speak. He was still frowning, as if there was something he could not figure out. After a moment of silence, he suddenly raised his head, his eyes flashing with a dangerous light. "Then, let me experience it again." As soon as he finished speaking, he pounced forward again and collided with Li Yunqin. But this time, the snake spirit was prepared. She immediately took out a colorful snake slough and covered herself in it. It turned out that her reaction was correct. A continuous series of explosions and roars immediately rang in her ears. It was as if the world had become a big drum, and the two terrible great demons had turned themselves into drumsticks, using all their strength to shake the earth. Boom! 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 The entire land was plowed into the sky by the two of them. The sky and the earth were overturned, and then tons of soil and rocks that they had blasted into the sky poured down, burying everything. Then, there was the intertwining of flames and smoke, and the continuous sharp hissing sound almost tore the eardrums. The snake spirit could feel that the magical weapon refined from her snake skin, which she used to protect herself, was being bombarded by the aftermath of the battle between the two. It was on the verge of collapse, like a small boat drifting on the stormy sea. This is such a terrible power. The battle lasted for a full quarter of an hour. When the snake spirit thought that she was about to die of exhaustion, the world finally returned to peace. She waited for 3 breaths before she dared to push aside the sand and gravel on her body and poked her head out to look. The scene in front of her was no longer what it used to be. The land had turned into black scorched earth, and flames and smoke were rising from it. The world in front of her was like purgatory, and in the midst of the flames and smoke, Dragon Son and the evil king were still opposite each other. But the evil king was still the evil king, and there was not a single injury on his body. But Dragon Son's body was almost plated with a layer of golden light. That was the golden dragon blood. There was still mist rising from between his scales, but the mist had been dyed pale gold. However, he still stood steadily 5 steps away from the evil king and stared at him. Then he laughed again, and golden blood dripped from between his fangs. The evil king only said 1 strike, but now it has come so many times. After saying this, he took a step forward unsteadily. Because of this step, his body seemed to have suddenly split open, and the golden dragon blood flowed down from his scales like small streams. If we keep doing this, we won't be able to be good friends. The evil king still did not speak, and only stared at him. The snake spirit frowned, not knowing why her king was so abnormal. But she was not a stupid demon after all. She looked at Li Yunxin, and then looked at the evil king. Suddenly, she widened her eyes, slightly opened her mouth and stopped talking. She suddenly realized that her king was a demon of the mysterious realm. And this Long Jiu was fighting with a demon of the mysterious realm in the opponent's artifact for a full quarter of an hour. And he could still stand. And this was also what puzzled the evil king. For the first time he held back. It was just to teach this arrogant brat a lesson, and to see if he was really a dragon or not. So the first strike forced Li Yunxin to show his true form. In the end, it only scratched his skin. This surprised the evil king. According to the information he got through some channels, this Long Jiu used to be at the peak of the transcendent realm, but now he was at the true realm. But how big was the difference between the true realm and the mysterious realm? Even if he was Long's son, he couldn't. One must know that in the quarter of an hour after that, the evil king still had some strength left. But later, he hadn't met an opponent of his level for almost 1,000 years. The more he fought, the braver he became, the more excited he became. He had already used all his strength, but he didn't kill him. The evil king stared at Li Yunxin for a long time, and then said, "What did you do?" Li Yunxin laughed crazily. This laugh made blood flow. "I've said it before. You've obtained this magic treasure, but you're only using it to scare people and identify cultivators. It's a reckless waste of God's gifts." Octave Treasure's ancient scroll. Li Yunxin shook his head. The world's treasure. Those old fools of Daotong and Kinzo will go crazy when they see this thing. You used 2 pieces of iron to clamp it together. You ask me, how can a Yin spirit of the true realm stand in front of you for so long? Ha 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 ha. Now if I say I know how to use this thing correctly, do you believe me? I'm proficient in the art of painting. And this thing, although it's your artifact, how do you know how to use the spiritual power in this scroll? But how do you know how to use the spiritual power in this scroll? Li Yunxin narrowed her eyes. If we were outside, that blow of yours might have killed me, But in this scroll, the evil king, this is the home field of us Taoists. The flow of spiritual power, the pull of qi. There are too many things you can't see. The use of this treasure, you don't even know 1 out of 10 million. As he said this, the golden blood on his body was still flowing out. But neither the evil king, nor the snake spirit 7 Duanjin, had the slightest intention of taking advantage of him. Because he had already used reality to prove what he said. A demon of the true realm, using the opponent's artifact, fought to a draw with a demon of the profound realm. The evil king was silent for a long time, and finally said in a low voice, "Then, what do you want?" Li Yunxin finally let out a sigh of relief. He raised his hand and pointed at the snake spirit 7 Duanjin. The evil king and the snake spirit were slightly stunned. Then the evil king frowned. "You want her?" Li Yunxin let out a breath. "Come help me." Then he fell heavily to the ground. Chapter 260. When he woke up, Li Yunxin was in darkness, and he heard the sound of iron rings rubbing against each other. He quickly realized that the sound came from his body. His hands and feet were tied somewhere. He lay on the cold stone floor, like a prisoner in a prison. But he didn't immediately get up, and didn't speak. Instead, he opened his eyes and stared blankly in the darkness for a while. This feeling wasn't common. It wasn't just referring to being captured or bound. It also included feeling like a person waking up from a dream, feeling limp, as if he had really had a big dream. It should be said that he hadn't slept for a long time. But now that he had this experience, it didn't feel bad. Then he tried to break free, but he couldn't. This meant that the thing that bound his body wasn't an ordinary object. Otherwise, if it was just steel, it would just be spider silk in his eyes. The thing on his body shouldn't have been used to bind him. Now that he was in human form, he could vaguely feel that the iron chains were thick, and each ring was as big as a bowl. This thing was just right for a whale. Then light appeared. Somewhere in the void far above his head, there was a hole, which meant that he was in a very deep and wide underground. Using the yellow light, he recognized the figure of the evil king. A huge demon fell from above, and after a while, landed in front of Li Yunxin. The evil king was holding a lamp like a human, but the light of this lamp seemed to be wrapped by some invisible force, and the light couldn't reach more than 5 steps away. Everything within 5 steps could be seen, but beyond 5 steps, it was still dark. The evil king landed in front of Li Yunxin, and silently stared at him for a while. Li Yunxin tried to sit up. He succeeded. There were 4 thick iron chains on his body, coming from somewhere in the darkness, and they almost buried him inside. The iron chains were black in color, and some of the rings were filled with mud, giving off a strong moldy smell. So he smiled. This isn't the way to treat a guest. But the evil king obviously wasn't in the mood to have a friendly conversation with him. The big demon stretched out his hand, and the octave treasure's ancient scroll fell in front of Li Yunxin. The iron plate was stabbed into the ground. The evil king pointed at the iron plate and said in a deep voice, "Tell me, how do we use this treasure?" Li Yunxin raised his hands. The evil king frowned slightly, but he still pointed from afar, and the chains binding his right hand fell off and quickly retracted. But there was another sound in the darkness. It sounded like iron chains rubbing against bones. Li Yunxin didn't care about it for the time being. At this moment, all his attention was on the iron plate in front of him. He stood up with some difficulty and pulled the iron plate over with one hand. Then he ran his fingernail along the seam of the 2 pieces of iron, which he pried open. Then, his fingers moved along the seam, and the 2 iron plates were separated. Li Yunxin finally saw the true appearance of one of the 8 treasures' ancient scrolls, Misty Nun de Kai Di Mao. And then his expression froze for an instant. Then he couldn't help but laugh. Because he remembered when he was still a child, living in the mountain village, his parents had talked about this painting in a solemn but ethereal tone. One of the octave treasure's ancient scroll, the peak state that Taoists could reach, the world's most precious treasure, and the powerful relic of the art saint. But in fact, almost no one had seen what the art saint's handwriting looked like. At least no one had seen it in the past 1,000 years. At that time, Li Yunqin thought there were probably two reasons. First, the world said that the art saint was possessed by the devil. Since he was possessed by the devil, the less people saw the devil's things, the better it was. Daotong and Kinzo would hide them. Second, it was said that a long time ago, when the art saint was still alive, he didn't easily show his handwriting to others. This was easy to understand. An expert like that was always mysterious and unfathomable. When Ling Kongzi met Li Yunqin at the banquet in Wei City's Chonghua restaurant, Li Yunqin made a treasure scroll, the perverted eating picture. At that time, Ling Kongzi was moved and asked him if the art saint was still alive, and if he had any relationship with the art saint. And she said that Li Yunqin's painting style was similar to the art saint's. At that time he didn't understand. But now in this unknown dark room, he was able to see the art saint's authentic work with his own eyes. Many of his previous doubts were answered. Li Yunqin was silent for a while, not knowing what to say. Because this painting was as long as him, and half as wide as a person. It was such a huge painting. In fact, the content was only the size of 2 palms. It was like a 5 or 6-year-old child who just learned to doodle, scribbled in a crooked manner. There was a person in the painting. It should be a person. The body was a black line, and so were the 4 limbs. The hands were 5 short lines, and the head was a circle. There were 2 smaller circles in the circle, and there were 2 dots in the middle. This thing should be a person. The person's posture was crooked, and the lines were uneven, but it was obvious that he was bending over and raising his fist, as if he was going to hit something. As for what he was hitting a kitty cat. That's right, a kitty cat. It was the kind of white kitty cat with a pink bow on its head that all the little girls at his time liked. In fact, compared to the person, the cat was very well drawn, at least at the level of a 2nd-grade primary school student. The cat's eyes were 2 blackened dots. It was the black dot that was revealed through the hole in the iron plate. A person was on top of the kitty cat, and was about to punch her. Beneath them was something that looked like a rock. The stone was on a small hill. The hill was represented by a semicircle. Next to it was something that looked like a tree. Circles of orange paint were drawn in the air. Was that the sun that was about to set? Wusong hit kitty cat. Li Yunqin stared at this 8 treasures ancient scrolls with mixed feelings. He stared at it for a long time, not knowing how to comment on it. Now he knew why so few people had seen the handwriting of the art saint. He also knew why the evil king sealed the painting with an iron plate. Was it embarrassing? At the same time, he strongly doubted Ling Kongzi's taste. He thought that Ling Kongzi was mocking him, not praising him. At first, the evil king looked at him coldly, expressionless. But when Li Yunqin couldn't help laughing, became silent, and then laughed again, he finally shouted at him. What's so funny? This is an authentic handwriting. In fact, Li Yunqin could understand the psychological state of this profound realm demon. He stopped laughing and comforted him. Okay, I know it's an authentic handwriting. Ha 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 ha. The evil king seemed to be humiliated, and wanted to take the painting away from Li Yunqin. But Li Yunqin hurriedly grabbed the painting, and tried to control his expression for 3 breaths. He carefully probed his spiritual power into the painting, trying to understand the flow of spiritual power in it. Soon, his expression became serious and solemn. He held the painting in his hand, his eyes half closed and his brows slightly furrowed. He was silent for a quarter of an hour, then suddenly raised his left hand and waved it, without saying anything. The evil king understood what he meant. At this moment, Li Yunqin looked like a thinker who was extremely absorbed in the painting and had no time to think about the outside world. He wanted him to untie his left hand. The evil king hesitated for a moment, then pointed again. The iron chain on his left hand also fell off. Then, Li Yunqin held the painting in her left hand and used her right hand to form a sword and fingers. She traced the hilarious and childish lines in the air extremely slowly, following the strokes of the brush. It was as if every movement required all her strength. In just 2 breaths, he was sweating profusely. His finger first fell on one of the man's arms. The arm was only the length of a finger. But Li Yunqin's finger only moved half the length of an arm, and then fell down. He suddenly raised his head and panted. as if his body had been pressed thousands of meters under the sea for hundreds of years. And now he could finally rise to the surface and breathe again. He stared at the evil king, then at the painting. His face was covered in sweat, and he murmured in surprise, "How could this be?" His father had told him when he taught him the art of painting. Those paintings with extremely high realms and profound ideas were not easily seen by ordinary people, or even cultivators with low realms. If they tried to comprehend it, the spiritual power in the painting might backfire, and people with insufficient cultivation would pay a terrible price. But Li Yunxin had never seen the treasure his father talked about, until he saw this thing. In ordinary paintings, there were meridians of spiritual power flowing in it, like the meridians of the human body, extending in all directions. If he followed the meridians, there would always be traces. But in this painting, the meridians could not be called lines. Countless complicated and indescribable spiritual power flowed and overlapped, forming a dense space. If the traces in the paintings he saw were all lines, then the lines in this painting were already woven into cloth. He tried to find a thread to follow, but even if he put all his energy into it, he could not follow it for long. Instead, he was quickly wrapped up, almost falling into it and suffering from the backfire. At this time, he finally realized this was indeed the relic of the art saint. It was a painting that had far surpassed his understanding of the great Tao of painting. Every trace of spiritual energy was integrated into the world. The painting was no longer a simple painting, but a part of the world. The childish lines in the painting were just the surface. The painter's realm was so high that he had completely broken away from the realm of using images to represent the image. And this casual scene on the painting was proof of the painter's fearsomeness. Li Yunxin stood rooted to the ground for a long time, unable to speak. When he was in Xianghua Tower, he also painted a painting of eating. The painters present all thought that he was being improper, but that improper painting was actually a treasure. Now he also understood how the painters felt at that time. At that time, he was really despicable. What an arrogant art saint. Seeing him like this, Evil King glared at him and said in a low voice, "What's wrong?" Li Yunxin did not answer him immediately. Instead, he thought for a while, and then casually threw the painting to Evil King. Evil King was slightly stunned. He did not expect Li Yunxin to return the treasure like this, after he received it with his own hands, without any reluctance. "What are you suppressing here?" After another 2 breaths, Li Yunxin raised his head and asked him seriously. Chapter 261. The expression on Evil King's face froze for a moment, but then he relaxed. Li Yunxin knew that the dullness meant that he had asked the right question. This place was suppressing something. The subsequent relaxation meant that Evil King believed that he could understand the painting, and was not just spouting nonsense. The demon put on a stern face and said gruffly, "You can tell?" Li Yunxin thought about it and said, "I can't completely understand the meaning of this painting, but I can see something. I don't know the specific spiritual power composition, but this painting is used to suppress demons. It has the meaning of subduing the dragon and the tiger." He looked around in the darkness and said, "What is suppressed? Does it need the octave ancient scroll?" Evil King was a bit impatient and said, "This is not something you should care about." Li Yunxin said with a serious face, "I can't communicate with a layman like you. If you want me to teach you how to use this treasure, I need to understand it first. For example, I need to know what this thing is used to suppress. Then I can use it to figure out what it is used for. Think about it carefully. Do you want to tell me or not?" It had been a long time since someone dared to talk to Evil King like this. Moreover, Evil King was not the kind of person who would say, "Hey, he's being rude to me, what a special feeling." Thus, when he heard Li Yunxin's words, he wanted to vent his anger. But he was a demon who had lived for many years, and knew that this dragon's son had this kind of arrogance, not to mention that he had some secrets. He suppressed his anger in the bottom of his heart, and made up his mind to get what he wanted from Li Yunxin's mouth, and then teach him a good lesson. But even so, it took him a long time to make a decision. He held the lamp in his hand, and thought for a while in the darkness, then subconsciously looked into the darkness. Only then did he frown and snort viciously. Fine. Fine, I'll let you see. But if you see him, don't think about leaving. As he said that, he raised his hand. Li Yunxin stopped him and said, Wait a moment. Let me ask you first, where are we now? The Diablo looked at him sinisterly and smiled. Heh. As for where it is, it's at the bottom of this pitfall mountain. Li Yunxin thought for a moment and subconsciously blurted out, Bottomless pit. Pitfall mountain and bottomless pit were the dwellings of demons and monsters in a supernatural novel in his previous world. At this moment, he also subconsciously raised it, but unexpectedly, the evil king was stunned again. Then, he carefully looked at Li Yunxin, and his expression became solemn. You know quite a lot. After saying this, he took a few steps with the lamp in his hand, causing the ground to tremble. Then he looked at Li Yunxin again. I don't know where you got all this information from, but since that was the case, there was no way he could get out. I'll give you this first. In the future, if I stay here with you, I'll have to interrogate him bit by bit. After that, he ignored Li Yunxin and raised the lamp high. Some kind of restriction on the lamp suddenly disappeared, and the light instantly spread out. This small lamp actually illuminated the entire underground cave. This bottomless pit turned out to be terrifyingly big. The evil king's pitfall mountain could be considered to have occupied a large area. But now that Li Yunxin saw it, the bottomless pit at the bottom of the pitfall mountain was many times bigger than the pitfall mountain. He was a great demon of the true realm. His eyesight was extremely good. But even he could see the edge of the cave. As far as his eyes could see, he could only see the darkness at the end. But the cave itself wasn't eye-catching. It was the thing behind Li Yunxin. The first thing he saw was the toe. But there was no flesh on the toe, only white bone. The white bone of this toe was as tall as Li Yunxin. The problem was that the phalanx of the foot wasn't alone. It was connected to the instep of the foot. The instep of the foot was also white bone. It was already like a small mountain. Above the instep of the foot was the leg bone. It was like a towering tree. Li Yunxin slightly opened his mouth, looked up, and realized that it was an incomparably huge skeleton. It looked like a human skeleton, but the number of bones wasn't right, there were more. There were terrifying bone spurs growing on the bones, like a thistle forest. But even the smallest bone spur on the skeleton was taller than Li Yunxin. The skeleton half knelt on the ground, its two arms stretched out to the sides, bound by countless thick iron chains. Li Yunxin realized that he was bound by a few of the countless iron chains. The huge head of the skeleton was lowered. Its black eye sockets looked down from the hundreds of meters high hole, as if it was looking down at the two people below it. It looked like this thing was trapped here when it was alive. Its arms were bound, stretched, and hung somewhere above. Then it was killed. So it maintained this posture, and was still hanging here after death. However, countless iron chains, which were as thin as hair compared to the skeleton, bound it tightly and fixed it in place. Compared to it, the evil king and Li Yunxin were like two ants compared to a tall adult human. Li Yunxin sucked in a breath of cold air. What is this thing? It was really too big. If it was still alive and standing up, it could be clearly seen from 100 miles away, right? The evil king was very satisfied to see such a scene. Long Jiu, who always seemed to be calm and confident, was stunned by this thing. He sneered. I can't let you know this kind of thing. You just need to know that this is what the ancient scroll is suppressing. Now do you understand? Li Yunxin looked at this huge thing, and after a while, he was able to speak. Because huge things were always shocking, especially for people like him. Especially for someone like him. His deepest memories almost all belonged to another world. And in that world, many principles were clear. People could easily judge what was possible and what was impossible. That was a rational world. But at this moment, when the rational Li Yunxin saw this thing, even in this mystical world, it was considered the most mystical among the mystical. Right? He had never seen any records about it in the ancient books. So he was silent for a long time. And he was thinking about something in his mind. The art saint, the ancient scroll. the group of demons created by the art saint, and the background story of these demons. Suppression, huge bones. These clues were connected together. Thinking about the background story again. Why did he leave such a background? The painting of Wu Song angrily beating Hello Kitty was, in fact, a horribly complicated masterpiece. It was not as shallow and childish as it looked. So, all the things that the art saint did here, was it not as it looked like? Just something that guy did because he was bored. A bold idea suddenly jumped out of Li Yunxin's mind. So he was silent for a while and turned around. Evil King, how long have I been unconscious? The evil king was once again surprised by Li Yunxin's attitude. In fact, this feeling of surprise had always been there. It was like, you see a stranger as an enemy, and he behaved like an enemy to you. But that stranger was like Li Yunxin, repeatedly talking to you in a calm manner, no matter what you were planning in your heart. This Li Yunxin at this moment was like chatting with a friend, calmly asking him, how long have I been unconscious? It should be noted that he was imprisoned here, and such a secret was revealed to him. Where did he get his calmness and courage? It was like this world was just a big dream to him. A strange feeling arose in the evil king's heart. He had never felt such an emotion before. And this emotion made him more curious about Li Yunxin, and even temporarily diluted the hostility in his heart. So he thought for a while and reluctantly answered, just 4 hours. Li Yunxin thought for a while, and looked like he was a little relieved. Then he said in a serious and solemn tone, the previous question. I thought you killed old demon Fulu, and tricked his 7 sons to work for you. But in fact, things are not like that, right? I want to know the inside story. Li Yunxin's tone became softer. His expression also seemed to be softer. This made the evil king's heart give birth to a strange feeling. This feeling made his heart tremble a little. It was as if he had eaten delicious food when he was extremely hungry, filling up the empty part of his body. He stared at Li Yunxin, and shook his head in confusion. What kind of sorcery is this? Li Yunxin was stunned. Ha! The big demon stared at him, and subconsciously patted his chest. The hard fist hit the carapace on his chest, making a metallic sound. Here. The demon didn't know how to describe this feeling. Seeing Li Yunxin's expression, he felt that he was thinking too much, but what the hell is going on? Li Yunxin looked at him, and suddenly smiled in understanding. It's probably my charm, he said softly. Because he was seriously injured, his voice was a little hoarse. But it was more magnetic. It's not your fault that you like a beautiful and gentle person like me. As he spoke, he raised his hand and waved it in front of the evil king's face. The evil king was a little dazed again. Then he heard Li Yunxin say, what is the truth? The evil king stared at Li Yunxin for a while, blinking his eyes. Then he let out a low sigh, and actually began to speak. That old demon Fulu, I didn't kill him. In fact, you've already seen him. That's him. As he spoke, he pointed behind Li Yunxin, and as if he was afraid that Li Yunxin would misunderstand, he added, those iron chains are him. Old demon Fulu's true body is a gourd vine. After a long time, he became a cultivator. He also formed 7 gourds on his vine. My 7 adopted sons were born from him. Li Yunxin interrupted. These? Did he tell you this, or did you see it with your own eyes? The evil king blinked. What? I mean, you saw him cultivate from a gourd vine and become a human? That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.